Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 8th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. All of the councillors are present tonight. No one's attending electronically. Tonight's regular meeting of Council is being held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the question period sign-up sheet, which is on the table to the double doors to my left. Please note that the Council Procedure Bylaw has been updated and questions may be asked related to the following agenda headings only: consent items, reports, or other business. Before we start the meeting, I would like to take a few moments to remind those who are attending in person about the rules of decorum for all council and committee meetings. A meeting of council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The council chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists in accordance with WorkSafe BC regulations. To support this, disrespectful conduct will not be tolerated, so we ask that there be no cheering or jeering or other outbursts from the gallery at any time. This will ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, a member of council, or staff, is not interrupted and can make their point freely without distraction or fear of ridicule. In instances where a speaker is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit, their microphone will be cut off. Similarly, if there are outbursts by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop. And if they do not comply, they may be asked to leave as permitted under Section 133 of the Community Charter. If necessary, Council may call a recess in order to reset the environment of the Council chambers. It is Council's belief that if everyone is respectful of these basic considerations, this meeting and future meetings will be more effective in the furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry. And we do have one, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening to yourself and Council. For late items this evening, agenda item 12A, lease disposition to BC Housing, we have the addition of a delegation from Valentina Cardinelli. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Next item is the Mayor's report. I just have 3 items tonight. The first is a little reminder for the many citizens of Nanaimo who use Westwood Lake Park, one of our most popular venues. The city is implementing access changes to Westwood Lake Park in advance of park improvements which are planned for construction this fall and winter. Starting last week, the 3rd and final gate access into the park at the end of Westwood Road will be accessible to boat launch traffic only. All other vehicle traffic wishing to enter the park must now do so through the new parking lot on Westwood Road. The gravel parking lot close to Second Beach is also accessible through the new parking lot. Park users are asked to follow all on-site signage. The change is being made along with minor beach maintenance, including the removal of the old metal railing at the rear of the beach, topping up of beach sand, and the installation of temporary pop-up parquet in what was the parking lot just behind the first beach. Just to remind everyone, it's one of the busiest and most popular places to visit in Nanaimo, and it is undergoing a variety of phased improvements over several years. And ahead of the busy summer season, the City of Nanaimo is planning these beach maintenance activities and early beach expansion into the portion of the park that will no longer be used for parking. So the changes taking place are temporary and are to help park users get used to the changes that will come as part of phase 2 of the project, which will see the pedestrianization, converting a street or an area to pedestrian use only, of the area behind First Beach and to all but boat traffic, along with many accessibility improvements. The second thing is a good news story from the RCMP under the title of "You Etch It, We Catch It." Central Vancouver Island Crime Stoppers, in partnership with the Nanaimo RCMP, ICBC, and AutoCheck Automotive, are hosting an event to raise awareness about the theft of catalytic converters in Nanaimo. Statistics from 2022 reveal that in Nanaimo there were 119 reported thefts of catalytic converters. Across British Columbia, 6,143 thefts were reported in 2022, which was up 89% from 2017, 5 years earlier. The cost to replace those stolen items tops $8 million. On Saturday, July 13th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I repeat, on Saturday, July 13th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., vehicle owners can bring their vehicle to AutoCheck Automotive, located at 605 Bowen Road, where certified technicians will engrave their catalytic converters for free. And as Constable Gary O'Brien, and Crime Stoppers coordinator for the Nanaimo RCMP says, marking or engraving catalytic converters is a proven technique in reducing the chances of having these items stolen. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., AutoCheck will have 2 bays open specifically for engraving catalytic converters. It is suggested the last 8 digits of the vehicle's VIN be used in order to better track the item if stolen. To enhance the experience while vehicle owners wait, volunteers with Crime Stoppers, Nanaimo Community Policing, and ICBC will be on hand running a free barbecue and providing handouts. The process to engrave your catalytic converter will take approximately 20 minutes. So everyone who wants to should take advantage of this wonderful opportunity. And finally, I just want to express sincere thanks on behalf of the council to all of the team who were involved in celebrating July the 1st, Canada Day. It was an amazing success. The atmosphere was fabulous, so many happy faces, an incredible array of activities, great entertainment, and every kind of food anyone could want. So to staff involved in the Parks and Recreation and all others who assisted, and the many volunteers, thank you for making it a very special day for the citizens of Nanaimo. Thousands of you turned out, and it reminded us how lucky we are to live in this wonderful country. I have nothing further on the Mayor's report. We have nothing to rise and report on from the in-camera meeting, Ms. Gurry. We have no presentations. Committee minutes are just for receipt. And finally, I'd ask for a motion for adoption of consent items. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I would request that 10B3, Nanaimo Operations Center Public Works Yard project update be removed.
Be removed for a separate vote. Okay. Motion to approve them all, but we'll be voting on everything except that one, Ms. Gurry. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Brown, you wish to speak to 10B3.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And I know this was subject to a lot of dialogue and debate at the Governance Priorities Committee. I'm not necessarily opposed to the option that was recommended out of committee. However, I do still have some unanswered questions that make me uneasy, and that's with respect to the opportunity cost of proceeding with that option in respect to some of the other capital projects that need funding. I know that we do have significant amount of debt capacity, but what I'm more concerned about or contemplative about is the respect of the annual budget and what it would cost to pay for that debt servicing. And without that, some of those numbers in that conversation with council in the later, in the broader context of capital projects and the priorities around those, I'm not necessarily comfortable proceeding with this one at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
There we go, it's on now. Thank you. I missed the GPC, but I did watch it and watched all the debate. And I just do want to echo what Councillor Brown has said, you know, after thinking about the comments about how we will we debt service this. I think that's something that we really have to look at. I am in favor of proceeding, but I would like to have that information as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere.
So I guess I'm just looking for some clarification of what Councillor Brown is asking for. Are you looking for this to be deferred? And further to that option, number 4 is directing staff to look at other funding options with respect to debt servicing. So does that address it at all, or?
There is no motion on the floor, but Councillor Brown, accept the motion to approve?
Yeah.
That, I just said the motion to approve is on the floor, but there's no motion to amend.
No, there's not. And, you know, I want to respect that the committee did have a lot of debate. I just wanted to express my opposition at this point. No, I don't think number 4 fully addresses my concerns. I'm really concerned about the conversation with council around opportunity cost of picking one project and maybe what the impact it might have on not having the comfort level around debt servicing payments to proceed with other projects down the line. I know a lot of work has been done on several projects, and some of them are at a level of maturity and have a significant amount of community need as well. And I would just want to make sure that they aren't jeopardized based on council's comfort level, and I just don't think we've had that complete capital programming costs for me to vote in favor of this. So I'm not proposing alternate direction, simply because this did come out of committee with a large level of support, but just pulling it to express my concern, and I'll be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastermere, you're okay? Councillor Hemmens, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the perspective of Councillor Brown, and I wonder, we do have an upcoming GPC on all of our capital projects, and I wonder if it would be appropriate to consider this after we've had that conversation where we're looking at the RCMP station, the South End Community Center, the Waterfront Walkway in the context of the Public Works Yard. If I could have some staff comment on that, please.
Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is correct. On next Monday, with your GPC meeting, we hope to come back to you and have that broader discussion around capital projects across the city that will, in all likelihood, require long-term borrowing. So that is certainly an option if council wanted to defer a decision on this matter until you've had a broader discussion and understanding of how, as Councillor Brown says, how the lost opportunity costs on those other projects could potentially be impacted by a decision here tonight. A motion to defer would take us to the 22nd, then, where we'd be back in front of council. Just looking to Ms. Mercer to make sure that confirm that we could still meet the bylaw dates on that.
Ms. Mercer.
Whether we do the funding, whether we determine if there are other funding options, which is what we were going to come back with your decision tonight. We were going to come back on the 22nd with some funding options to meet whatever choice you've picked. Having said that, we could bring a bylaw forward that says we would, borrow up to X amount of dollars. Because there's such a big difference between 48.5 and 90 million, that we probably wouldn't be able to get the bylaw. Do we need 3 readings for that, Sheila?
I think if this is what council wants to do, we could certainly adjust
Yeah.
the schedule, and I think there's some time in the fall that council should just be aware it may push back. If you elect to go with the NP process, it might push it back a few weeks, but I think there's some flexibility in there in the schedule to buy a couple weeks, should council wish to defer.
And may I just confirm that the intent of the part of our conversation at the GPC is about the funding of those capital projects, and so we will get this context all at one time rather than just choosing projects and then trying to catch up with our understanding of the funding?
No, hopefully the intent of the GPC will be to talk about those kind of key capital projects that are both in your city plan and in your strategic priorities and have been for many years. Which ones the council want to move forward with, one or more, and then what is the impact on our borrowing capacity, and then what would, as noted tonight, what would be the impact on other projects like the NOC should council proceed. So that's the intent, to come back next week and get some further direction.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, then Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm wondering where we're at with this now. I will not be supporting the recommendation that's in our package. I would support a deferral. I have several concerns about the recommendation, one of them being the impact on our ability to borrow, or our comfort level with borrowing to get other projects underway. I think we would have the ability, but I'm not sure how comfortable council would be. I would much prefer borrowing in phases rather than $91 or $92 million off the top. And I have several other reasons for that, but I will hold those depending on where this conversation goes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll put a motion forward to defer to the next.
Moved by Councillor Perino, seconded by Councillor Hemmens. Discussion?
We're too far away from an agreement. We need more time, more information.
I was going to say we haven't voted on it yet, but Councillor Eastmere.
I think that we actually are pretty close to potentially being able to agree with a little bit more conversation, and I think this is a really important path that we walk down together. And so I think the deferral and a bit more clarification, it's a worthwhile project to take our time on it.
Councillor Gesselbrock speaking to the deferral motion. All those in favor of deferral? Deferral, Councillors Armstrong, Eastmere, Hemmens, Thorpe, Perino, Brown, and Manley. Those opposed to deferral? Moi. Motion carries. It's deferred. Next is item 11, delegations unrelated to agenda items. We have none. First item is reports, the lease disposition to BC Housing portion of 1030 Old Victoria Road. And Ms. Mercer, you're going to introduce that, please.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Skills to walk you through some of the highlights of the lease.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Tonight, staff are seeking Council's approval to lease part of city-owned property located at 1030 Old Victoria Road to the Provincial Rental Housing Corp. In January 2024, the province and the city signed a new memorandum of understanding for the new provincial Heart and Hearth programs. The province, through BC Housing and city staff, have worked together to identify the city-owned property for a new integrated navigation center to provide 60 spaces for people experiencing homelessness. BC Housing has identified Vancouver Island Mental Health Society as the lead operator for the center. BC Housing has requested a 3-year lease with 2 optional 2-year extensions for the 1.2 acre area, lease area. The extensions will accommodate potential changes in the timelines for BC Housing's permanent housing projects. Staff have completed the statutory notifications to enable us to lease the property, and if lease approval is received, BC Housing will continue to establish the center with the anticipated opening date in early 2025. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have regarding the lease.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Is this the same type of navigation center as was originally proposed, or have they changed the guidelines of who will be going there, how long they will be there, et cetera?
It's the same as the one they originally proposed.
So hardest of the hardest to house, come in for a night, then leave?
Sorry?
Hardest of the hardest to house, they come in for a night, then leave?
Yes.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions from Ms. Skills, we do have a delegation, Valentina Cardinale. Ms. Cardinale? When you get to the podium, if you could introduce yourself, you'll have 5 minutes, and when you've got 1 minute left, I will let you know. Please.
Hello, I'm Valentina Cardinale. I live on Old Victoria Road, and I'm opposed to the low barrier housing at 1030 Old Victoria Road. I'd like to speak to 3 subjects: density, public engagement, and the housing model itself. Density. From the Nanaimo News Bulletin, July 6th, CROG points to 53 affordable rental units and 62 units for moderate and low-income seniors. Well, let's be honest. This is not the same type of low-barrier housing that is proposed for 1030 Old Victoria Road. That would be a 60-unit facility and the highest concentration yet in one building in Nanaimo, and almost effectively doubles the amount of people living in this area in one move. Councillor Manley said via messenger, we need to revitalize downtown and not ghettoize it. We need to put supportive and temporary housing in different parts of town rather than concentrating everything. Well, I would like to state emphatically that placing this unit here, you are indeed concentrating this controversial model of housing in one place. To start, the 1030 Old Victoria Road site with 60 units will only be 950 meters away from the 10th Street Island Highway Rona location itself with 50 units. And that's a mere 600 meters away from the proposed Cranberry location, potentially proposed Cranberry location with another 46 units. These numbers don't include nearby Samaritan Place, 51 further units, and also the site of Townsite Road is Newcastle Place on Terminal Avenue, 50 units, soon to be expanded. The Nanaimo First Nations supportive facility at 355 Nickel Street with 35 units, and not to mention the Salvation Army. There would be 156 people who potentially suffer from homelessness, addiction, and mental illness in our immediate vicinity in facilities under a kilometer and a half apart from each other. Such concentration will attract drug dealers and unhoused friends of residents in numbers we cannot and may not ever know. The recycling depot and 2 smaller, well-run, established rehabilitative facilities are also within very short meters of this proposed location. In North Nanaimo, above Town Site, there are 51 units currently run by VIMHS, at least 23 of which are low-income housing. In South Nanaimo, below Town Sites, we would have 300 units. How much distance is permitted between facilities exactly? This isn't even beginning to cover places that are trying to further support those experiencing homelessness, such as an outreach pharmacy, an overnight shelter, a safe injection site, as well as organizations such as Stone Soup and Rise Bridge. I don't have anything against these supportive places. I'm just saying that everything is in one area, and the result will be detrimental to all Nanaimo and property owners, and also very much the residents within these low barrier facilities. Public engagement. My frustration is not with those who are experiencing homelessness. Not at all. It is at this model of housing, as well as disappointment with Nanaimo City Council lack of public engagement, and a battle regarding zoning on these properties that has been ongoing since 2016. Please feel free to ask me any questions at a later date about anything you want. The Nanaimo News Bulletin article headline from July 3rd, which read, "Shelter announced in 2020 is misleading." I'm sure the idea of a shelter somewhere without many specific details was discussed, but this is the timeline of how it felt to us. June 14th,
1 minute, Ms. Cardinelli.
2024, the city bought the land that was not publicly apparent for sale after an in-camera secret discussion. June 28th, 2024, I first saw the announcements published online in the Friday afternoon of a long weekend where many residents were exceptionally busy. July 2nd, 2024, a meager amount of letters received by residents only within 200 meters of the proposed facility. It was only been 10 days since I'm here today. I did not hear about a council meeting until July 5th, and I was 13 minutes away from not being able to speak today. I would like to skip ahead to the housing model itself. Supportive housing ought to be celebrated, not fought tooth and nail. Making the housing model more diverse within the facility itself would be a real move in that direction. I'd like supportive housing staff to have the authority to prohibit disruptive guests, and I would like potential curfews. Like many, I have been deeply affected by the...
Finish your statement, but quickly, you're past your time.
Thank you for your time. I hope you will consider my request and do not place the 60-unit low barrier housing facility at 1030 Old Victoria Road. I have also been misinformed and thought that the residents were not coming and going every night. I thought they were stable. And so I am just learning that tonight. That is
Thank you,
unacceptable.
Ms. Cardinelli. Are there any... This is a council meeting, not entertainment. Ms. Cardinelli, I believe Councillor Hemmons has a question. No? Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Your Worship. This question is for staff, and it's related to the population that we expect to see at the NAV Centre. I understood from our conversations with BC Housing that the Navigational Centre would be run like the hearth settings, which means that folks who are using that service are being triaged through the shelter system and not vetted but they have some touch with the shelter service. They have some touch with outreach service. They're not coming directly off the street. So I'd like that confirmed. I'd secondly like it confirmed that it's not a one night and leave. I understood that this was a home for 60 people.
Thank you, through your worship. So certainly on that second part first, you're absolutely correct. The intent is that unlike shelters where people come and go overnight, this is supposed to be both the hearth and the nav center where these rooms are permanently assigned to people. And then unlike a shelter where you leave in the morning and you're not sure whether you have that bed when you get back at night, these are assigned to people. The units themselves, we're getting a bit outside with the city's involvement, but the units themselves will be managed through the BC Housing's program. And as with all of their housing units, they'll be, people will be assessed and appropriately designated to proper housing facilities to support their needs.
Thank you. So just for real clarity there, this is not a come and leave the next morning and potentially a new 60 folks can come into the neighborhood and get shelter there. This is the same 60 people every night. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino, then Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Eastwell, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Councillor Hemmons for her questions. They were some of my own. Councillor Armstrong brought this up. My understanding was that everyone who will be going to this facility, should it be built, is not only vetted, but they want to be there. So they're not being pushed to be there. They're not being pulled off the street to be there. These are people who want to be there. And so they're really taking that move to improve their life and improve their health. Is that correct to your understanding, to our CAO? Sorry, I should have addressed it at the beginning anyway.
I think that's a good summary. At the end of the day, it's an optional facility like any housing development, and they'd have to be willing to attend the property, correct?
Okay, because when we talk about the hardest to home, sometimes we're talking, I think some of us, certainly in my mind, that means people who don't want to have a home and maybe don't want to get well, but that is not necessarily the case. These are people who want to be there and want to get well. Is that right? Fair assumption?
Sorry, through the chair, I think that's a very good summary of what the proposed project is, yes.
And our understanding with this BC Housing was that there would be wraparound services to be there for the residents who are there so that everyone will have systems in place to receive help, get help, and will we be able to intervene with police services should that be a need?
Certainly, the BC Housing is committed that both the navigation centers and all of these facilities are staffed 24/7, and that the navigation center especially has wraparound services that are corresponding with the needs of the residents. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Eastwell.
I do need more clarification because Ms. Gill said that it was the original navigation center concept. So which one is it? Is it a hearth-to-hearth or is it a navigation center?
Your Worship, the original announcement navigation center, as you know, came out a number of years ago. The more recent announcement around the funding model of hearth housing, the funding was just earlier this year. So it didn't exist at the time of the navigation center. I think when we had these discussions with BC Housing, they indicated that the models, the funding streams were different, but the models of how the housing operate in terms of the hearth and the navigation center were very similar.
But similar, but they didn't clarify because why are they calling it a navigation center then if it's supposed to be a hearth-to-hearth?
I believe, again, that's probably a better question for BC Housing, but my understanding is more about the funding streams that they're coming from.
I'm sorry, but I struggle with this and won't be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere and then Councillor Thorpe.
I'm just wondering if there was any intent for BC Housing to be present at tonight's meeting. They were here on a related item another night, and I just really wish that they were here to offer some of this clarification.
They certainly offered to attend tonight, but given the discussion is really focused about the lease of the property and not as much the use, I did not invite them to participate in it.
Okay, those items are so intrinsically linked for me that unfortunately it's making it really difficult to understand what we're agreeing to tonight. And I think that reflects my entire experience with this Heart and Hearth discussion. It's like an acronym and the meaning keeps changing. And my understanding is like the Navigation Center was announced a long time ago, so that's why we have maintained using the name Navigation Center, because there's been money set aside by the province for that. But my understanding was it really was just another Hearth site, which is the small pod housing that's temporary for people who've been triaged through the shelter system, who have a place to call home until they're ready to transition into somewhere better with the wraparound supports that they need. And if that is truly the intent of what this site is going to be, I'm happy to support that, but I'm actually suddenly lacking the confidence to know that that is what we're agreeing to.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, I think similar to Councillor Eastmuir, the concept of a navigation center is something which I believe I have generally supported over the recent months and years, and we have asked the province to consider us as a location. The specific location is always challenging, of course. I want to be able to support this evening, but I do still have reservations, and I don't know if staff can help me at all, because the questions really would go to the Health and Housing Ministry. And my concerns are, when this building is established, do we have any specifics on what the levels of services will be for the inhabitants, the level of support that will be offered, and the level of ongoing community engagement? Because it's one thing to say it'll have wraparound services or it'll be staffed 24/7, but does that mean one person 24/7, or does it mean multiple staff facilitating multiple concerns? Now, I don't know if our staff can answer that, Your Worship, through Mr. Lindsay or the other staff that are here, but if there is an answer, I'd appreciate it.
So through Your Worship, Councillor Thorpe, certainly in the summary that BC Housing's provided, they've indicated staffing 24/7 with a minimum of 5 staff in attendance at any time. I would say that in terms of this discussion about the Hearth housing and the Navigation Center, I think, council's signed MOUs and letters of intent with the ministry on deliberating both of these projects and provided partnerships to work with both. And I think tonight is just the final step in those previous agreements.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Manley and then Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question to staff. The BC Housing has committed to doing community consultation on these projects.
Sorry, I should have, Councillor Thorpe asked that question, I should have answered it. So they do a model called community advisory committees now for many of the projects, which are led by BC Housing, so that what it is generally it's often surrounding neighbors and service agencies and individuals who have an interest in the property management, who get together on a regular basis to discuss issues and come up with solutions. So they've had successful community advisory committees on many projects. BC Housing has indicated that moving forward, their intent is not to lead community advisory committees. We're still hopeful that the actual operators who take over this or any other facility would, even if it's under a different name, have some similar process so that ongoing issues and concerns can be vetted through the community.
And will the operators have a good neighbor agreement in place?
The good neighbor agreement with the city would not generally be signed by the operator. The terms of the program would be with BC Housing.
Okay. Yeah, it was my understanding that they're going to be doing some kind of public consultation before the actual construction of the facility. And my understanding as well, clearly that they've gone from calling it a navigation center, but to a Heart and Hearth. This would be a Hearth site, and the wraparound services would be with social workers, people with mental health and addiction training, and 5 staff overnight. Clearly, you need for the health and safety of workers and for people that are staying in these facilities, and that they're going to have pretty much everything that they need within the facility, including laundry, showers, food, and storage for their belongings. And I would expect that they will have, as part of that, you know, some kind of agreements around who can visit these places, because they aren't considered residents, is my understanding. So it's not going to be a spot for drug dealers to be dropping in on. But that there will be limit on who's able to show up as guests at these sites.
Ms. Cardinelli, it's a council meeting. Thank you.
So, to your worship, on that point, I can say that they've committed that the buildings themselves are staffed, but also the entrances are staffed, and there's a fob entrance, and staff are associated at the front entrance in order to, I think, to do what you're suggesting, and sort of monitor the coming and going of the people attending the building.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to go back to Councillor Eastmere's question and just kind of that pathway of how we went from navigation to hearth. And my recollection is that the navigation center was this amorphous thing that we couldn't pin down. When Heart and Hearth came in as a program, we had this funding set aside in Nav Center that they didn't really know what it was going to look like. They moved it over to Hearth. In our conversations with BC Housing, they were very clear that this is a Hearth project, which means that there will be triage, there will be wraparound supports, there will be food on site, there will be support on site. So, Your Worship, with all of that, I'd like to make the recommended motion, please.
Thank you very much. Seconded, Councillor Gesselbrock. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough one. I'm a South Ender. I can see 702 Nickel from my house. I think it's a real misstep that they're not implementing a community advisory committee right out of the gate. I think they're going to be burned on that. And I think that's a message that we can carry to BC Housing, that engagement and proper community input and touch points are going to be crucial in the success of this project. To Ms. Cardinelli's points, I agree with all of them. There is increased density in the South End. There's no, like, the numbers say that, and there's a number of reasons for that that I can't really get into, but they're valid. It's not ideal. I'm sorry, Ms. Cardinelli, this is my turn to talk. Thank you. I have heard from BC Housing. Now, I know BC Housing gets demonized in these conversations, and I kind of regret that they're not here, but we have had ample opportunity to ask these questions. I get a sense from all BC Housing representatives that they are just doing the best they can, and they are bringing as many resources to our city as possible. They don't live here. They don't read the room. They don't have this experience that we do of sitting with our residents and feeling this tension. That said, they're still bringing beds for 60 people who are currently living on our streets right now. I do want to note to the community, if this passes tonight, you guys are, you're in good hands in that you're in the area association of the South End Community Association, which is, no, we're not. Okay, so, okay, excuse me. Right next door to you is the South End Community Association, which is Nanaimo's strongest neighborhood association, and you should reach, excuse me, Ms. Cardinelli, I think you'll be asked to leave if you can't stop.
That is quite correct, Ms. Cardinelli.
So you have allies right next to you, and they're actually in this room observing this conversation tonight. So I would suggest reaching out to them for help to see how it's gone with 702 Nickel and 355. The city of Nanaimo, I think about 2 years ago, voted to free up funds for any community that wants to organize around being a neighborhood association, and that is something that your neighborhood can do, and it will provide you access to resources through the city and access to city staff. So this isn't ideal. These conversations are never easy. These decisions are never without tension, but I stand behind this. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Gesselbrock, Armstrong, and Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I appreciate everybody coming out, and I know that just seeing the many emails that have come in and sort of what's being discussed on social media, there's concern. I think with respect to the South End having, providing a lot of services for folks with homelessness, that is correct. I live right in the middle, right in the heart of the South End.
I have to, every once in a while, you know, deal with folks camping up against the back of my backyard fence. I'm on a major thoroughfare, and it's pretty ugly out there, and we are in the middle of a crisis, a homelessness crisis, a drug crisis, and there's a lot of people out on our streets right now that aren't in a very good place, some right out of their mind, and it's causing a lot of social disruption and affecting everybody's sense of safety, and it's difficult to bear that. When dealing with, you know, in the role in council of like how to deal with the situation, just looking at how quickly we're mobilizing to deal with this tidal wave of folks in crisis on our streets. We've been trying to cite the location for this particular facility for about 3 years. And so for 3 years, there's been 60 units of a roof over somebody's head that hasn't been served because of the difficulty of finding something. And one thing through my experience here that I'm very sure about, that somebody that has a roof over their head with medical services is a lot safer to everyone and to themselves than if they're out on the streets without it. And when somebody's out on the streets sleeping rough, they're more likely to get their head kicked in, more likely to get an addiction, more likely to have septic wounds that are untreated, and in a very, very difficult spot that can be very unpredictable. And we need to move as quickly as possible to get places for folks and move them off the streets where they can get care. And it's not easy to sort and locate these places. What I can say is that I'm acutely aware of the need to spread it out more throughout the city, and we are working on that. And you can't simply drop a spot right in the middle of somewhere where there's no services around, and you have to be very methodical about where you place these facilities and slowly build out your system. And I do know that there's a lot of people right now that are working on how to deal with this tidal wave of homelessness and build the facilities and the services to start decreasing the numbers, and that's ultimately what we have to do. And so I know right now the systems planning organization, and for the first time, is helping to build a database that everybody who's homeless has got their name goes into this database, the services that they're accessing, and every time that they come into contact with services in Nanaimo, that's recorded. And so everybody knows who is in these type of situations so that we can better start moving people to the proper locations, but also build out the services that we need. And right now, what we have, compared to the number of homelessness that we are currently dealing with, that can be upwards to about 1,000, is a small fraction of what we actually need to service people. And so we need to put our heads down and work with all the partners that we can to build out this new system to deal with this new reality of having this many homeless people in our community. And we need to figure out how to do that as quickly as possible. And right now we're not moving at the pace that we need to, and partly because there's a lot of fear around what's going on. And I think what we can do that's the most proactive is that when a facility is coming into our neighborhoods, is to make sure that we are organized, that when there's issues that we can quickly speak to the right people to make the changes necessary. And compared to what I've seen 5 years ago when we put the first things on Terminal, BC Housing, the city, Island Health has figured out a lot of things how to make it run much, much smoother, and we're a lot better place than we were 5, 6 years ago because we're learning things, and we continually have to learn things. And I do have to say, as a member of the South End, I really do want to see more services built out so that the rest of the community can share this burden. But I do know that right now, with this many people on the streets without even a roof over their head, they're much worse, regardless where they are out on the streets, because it's so unpredictable and it just gets worse and worse. And right now, what we're running is a situation where people are just getting worse and worse, and they're becoming a greater and greater threat to the community. And so I'm very supportive of this, and I'm very committed to see it work well and to be responsive to what the community's concerns are, and continually to build out this larger system so that we can have it more spread out and start decreasing the number of people that are in this situation in this community, because we need to ultimately move to zero homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I'll be opposing for the following reasons. Number one is, and I've been opposing them recently, is we're not getting places for people that are in recovery, that are on our streets, that have making the choice to get healthy and clean, and they're living on our streets because they don't qualify for these. We need to have a phase 2 housing model so that people that are in recovery have a place to live. Second point is we're doing nothing for the homeless people that are there strictly because of financial reasons. They're not getting any supports. Our supports are all going to those with addictions and mental health. That's an issue for me. I think that we're missing out what I would call phased housing. When people are doing really well in the first phase, they should be moved to a second phase where they don't need as many supports and resources, which would save a lot of money. That's one of my issues. My third issue for this area is Claytree is there, which has got some of our most vulnerable society members there on a regular basis. There's concerns been raised by that group about the area. And I also think there's far too many people in the area and too many people and the numbers are too high. I disagree with what Councillor Gelsenbrook said, as having been actively involved in the low barrier housing back in 2010 when we put them in the north end and in the south end when the numbers were at 32. It was far more successful than having 50 and 75 people in one area that have very high needs. So for these reasons, I'll be opposing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Question through you to Mr. Lindsay. Just with respect to, I do always find it funny that it's called engagement, but by BC Housing, but it sort of happens after the fact. But just on the point there that was raised by some other councillors around the CAC, is it possible to make the lease contingent upon, the lease approval contingent upon that?
I think if that was an important condition to council of having a lease agreement, yes, I think council could do that. On the engagement, you're right, there was an earlier question around engagement, and BC Housing has committed to having, outside of the CACs, before the project gets started, additional engagement this summer heading into the fall. But yes, I think it could be.
Thanks, thanks, Mr. Lindsay. Your Worship, if it would be appropriate, I would simply like to add in a minor amendment to this clause that council approve, and this would be the amendment, subject to BC Housing agreeing to a good neighbor agreement and the establishment of a CAC, the disposition, and so on.
Second. Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? I'm going to be the odd person out tonight.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Because I expect BC Housing to do its work appropriately. And I'm not going to water down a motion that I think is important. Councillor Brown, anything further on the main motion?
No, Your Worship. I think there's we've had the conversation many times around this table, tried to, as much as possible, articulate concerns around the where a lot of these units were being sited, the density of these units, and how that impacts neighborhoods, but also individual success. And ultimately, those are provincial decisions and provincial programs. And I think we probably have 9 very similar opinions around this table about some of those decisions being made at the provincial level, and they probably reflect a lot of what's expressed in the community, both by those folks that find themselves in these neighborhoods or that are actively doing the work trying to help individuals in genuine need with health problems. And but ultimately, those decisions are being made at the province, and there's limited, I think, capacity to say no to some of those programs without seeing resources just completely removed from your community. And while this might not be ideal, I think without question that other scenario is significantly worse. So I will be voting in favor of this, especially with the amendment. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank the delegate and folks for coming out and for your emails and for raising your concerns. Recently, we attended the Federation of Canadian Municipalities AGM in Calgary, and when I talked to councillors from cities across this country, there is a homeless addiction and mental health crisis on the streets of communities, large and small, across this country. Nanaimo is not unique in any way, except that we have a much higher percentage of people who are unsheltered in this community. So, you know, we had a situation where a BC housing proposal was turned down in the Chase River area after opposition, concerted opposition to it. It was close to a school and the Boys and Girls Club. And, you know, after that, talking to staff, they said it was very difficult. BC Housing basically disengaged from this community. And so we weren't getting projects built in Nanaimo. In our last point in time count, we had 515 people identified as homeless. Of those 515 people, 78% of them had no access to any form of shelter at all. The three BC housing, or three BC ministries, using data that they collect, the RCMP and outreach teams figure that the number is closer to 800 to 1,000 people. So there are people living in vehicles, there's people camped out in our community from the border with Cedar all the way to the border with Lantzville. They're all over the place. I live half a block from Bowen Park. I've lived half a block from Bowen Park for the last 22 years, and I go to Bowen Park and there's people camped out in the park. When you compare that 78% figure of who's unhoused and has no access to shelter in Nanaimo, it is only 15% in Victoria. 15% of people that are unhoused in Victoria have no access to shelter. In Vancouver, it's 30%. In Nanaimo, we are at 78%. And so we have to do whatever we can to assist people on our streets. When we said no in 2018 to that facility, the Council of the Day, we ended up with a huge homeless camp in our downtown. And we've spent $100 million on this conference center. Our downtown core is our tourist district, and we need to make sure that it is not our homeless district and that people aren't living on our streets in our downtown core. So we have to find places for them to be. I expect that there's going to be announcements soon from BC Housing, from other areas of town. And I expect that BC Housing is also going to be announcing a facility that is dry, because these are things that this council has been demanding from BC Housing, that we want facilities in other parts of the community. The last 2.5 years, I've been the executive director of the Nanaimo Unitarian Shelter. I'm no longer the executive director there. But I can tell you that that is a low barrier facility with people with mental health and addiction challenges that frequent that site. And it's right across the street from Brecken School. There are residents all the way around that community, and I did part of our good neighbor agreement was to make sure that those residents had my cell number, my business card, so they could call me when there was a problem. Same with the shelter number. And that is about community engagement, and that's making sure that you engage with Vancouver Island Mental Health to make sure that they understand your concerns and know what's happening in your neighborhood. And we were able to mitigate those situations. We didn't have a problem with Brecken School at all. Had good communication with the principal and vice principal, and we had people with mental health and addiction challenges staying at the shelter. We also had people, in the last 6 months, the oldest male was 83 years old. The oldest female was 75 years old in early onset dementia. She's now at Samaritan Place, where she's got wraparound services and the help that she needs. Because every morning she would have to leave the shelter and be out on the streets. And these are some of the people that are out on our streets. We have people with all kinds of diverse disabilities, with cognitive disabilities, with mental health challenges, seniors, working people living in the Unitarian Shelter, coming there every night. And the process that's going to happen is that people that enter that shelter system are going to be triaged and sent to places, these temporary housing sites, where it's appropriate for them to be. We just don't have enough seniors housing. We don't have enough long-term care beds. We don't have enough dementia care beds. We don't have enough mental health facilities. We don't have enough detox and treatment facilities. And these are all things we've been talking to the BC government about, that we need these services here. It is not our job as council, mayor and council in the city to deal with social services, but this is all getting downloaded on us. And when You know, we're in a tough position that we cannot really say no to BC Housing at all, because we need facilities built in this community, and we need to get people off of our street where they can be safe, where they can get the services that they need, the wraparound services that they need, and get into permanent homes. And then we can work on eliminating some of these temporary housing units as we ensure that people have proper homes. So my advice to the neighbors is to reach out to Vancouver Island Mental Health. They're the organization that's going to be running this facility. Keep good communication with them. And like Councillor Hem has said, is have your community association networking with them so that you can keep on top of any issues and challenges that you face in your community. And down the road, 15 years of the Unitarian shelter, people aren't complaining to the shelter about what's going on. 15 years.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree with everything that has been said. I want to say it's a beautiful evening out there, and I so appreciate that all of you, felt that this was important enough to be here. So we appreciate that. The emails were excellent. The delegation, thank you. I don't agree with 100%, but I agree with a lot of what you said. So I appreciate that. The one thing that was very clear to me when BC Housing was here was that the support services, they said to us over and over again, would be wraparound and would be there. So that's good. The next thing that they said was that every person who will be invited to be there wants to be there. And that, for me, is the people that want to get well. I know for a fact that if we do absolutely nothing, I mean, everybody in this room knows, if we do nothing, then nothing's going to change. And we're going to see the continual just denigration of our citizens that are in so much need. If we can invite those that are ready to be housed into a facility like this and help them to make that step up, we can move them through the different facilities that we do have on Prideaux, on Nickel, and help them to get their lives back. If we do nothing, they're going to stay where they are, and the next place for so many of them is death. And that is not an option that I think any of us want to see. Now, I'll bet you every single person in this room has seen someone who should not be on the street. They need to be in care, in a hospital setting where they are, and forgive me for using the word locked in, for their own safety and for everybody else's safety. We know there are people like that. This is a terrible situation, but the fact is, no one's going to want to come to this facility if they don't want to, because they're not going to like the rules and what they have to do and where they have to sleep and where they have to bathroom and where they have to eat. They're not going to like those rules. That's what I like about this facility. That's a chance. We all know, I mean, I think there's so many of us now that know someone who has died from this dreadful drug addiction. But the fact is, if we do nothing, nothing is going to change. And as Councillor Manley said, we have left this too long, and our beautiful city is sitting here with a mess, and we have to do something. Now, I agree with Councillor Manley. You need to be there, and you need to tell us when the problems start, and we need to be there, and future councils need to be there for you. Absolutely. But I'm voting in favor of this tonight because people who want to get their life back deserve a chance. And you know what? We're already spending millions in extra police, extra CSOs, extra that we're doing. They deserve a chance. And I'm prepared to give that to them so that we can all say that we've done our part. But if it goes bad, we need to all be there to take the moves to either shut it down, police it, whatever we have to do. So none of us are going to leave you, and you need to insist future councils are the same. It's important that we give people a chance of a real life because we all have it, but there's a lot of people out there that don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gisselbrock. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. I have a question through to staff, to Mr. Lindsay, if I might, just because I feel like there was some incorrect information shared earlier in response to a question about what the nature of the site will be, and I think as Councillor Hemmons mentioned, we have had a lot of discussion about BC Housing with it, and I felt like we had an understanding. What was said earlier didn't square with that. Can you confirm what you know from your end?
Thank you. Yeah, and it's as we were saying earlier, it's not a shelter in the terms that people turn over every night. It's a system where, as been mentioned, people are triaged. They're sent by referral to the facility. The idea is that the facility has wraparound services that's reflective of the need that they need to be successfully stabilized. In terms of the question of the hardest to house, I want to be clear, this is not secure involuntary care, if that's what the question is, and the mayor's been and council's been advocating for the need for that across the province. That's not what this is. It's completely voluntary, that people are there and they're there under their own will. They will have agreements and rules that they have to comply with, but I would not describe these as the hardest to house. We do know that there's various facilities where people go into and they're not successful and they end up back on the streets, but the intent is to have services and supports that are reflective of the needs of the people that are sent there and assigned there and are showing up there voluntarily.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that clarification so that that we have a better understanding and so that the community has a better understanding. And I think the one thing that we heard in a lot of the email sent was like, where's the consultation? And there's, unfortunately on our end, there's legal obligations where we literally are not allowed to talk about these things until BC Housing announces it. And they choose the timing of the announcement and what goes in it. And we definitely don't have any say over that. It's kind of just, it is what it is. And it's really unfortunate the way that I think this particularly came about because as was alluded to by other councillors, we're working on sites in other areas, and how it comes across the community is as a concentration of services in your neighborhood. And there's no argument that that's how it feels. It's perceived like that because that's the way that the message has been put out. And that's, I think, really frustrating for me as a councillor personally to see, because I know the amount of work we're putting into trying to disperse these services to other areas. But then it kind of comes down to, well, the funding boat is here or the train's here, and if you miss it, then you're hooped. And we know the degree of need in Nanaimo, so like how can you say no to those supports and services for people who desperately need it? But the way that it gets communicated to the community, by the time you find out about it, you feel like it's too late. And that's like, from council's side, that's a legal obligation where we literally cannot talk about it. So that said, I'm going to support this, and I will support every other supportive housing project that comes forward, given if it has the right amount of services and supports to truly make it a success. And all I can do is have faith that it's going to work out if we stay on it as a council, and if we're adamant about what we need and we add items to the lease agreements, like needing a community advocacy and advisory group. I think that is going to be crucial on this. So glad to support, and sorry that the way that it's come across, and we're all committed to making it work.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll chime in briefly. I expressed some of my concerns earlier, and I continue to have those concerns. That said, I believe that I will support the recommendation and the motion that's on the floor. I think it's something that we have to do. I agree with much of what has been said at the table, including much of what Councillor Manley said, but I do disagree with 2 points that he made. One was the decision by a former council to turn down the BC Housing proposal in Chase River, and I was on that council. And we had fulsome debate over that, and the council was prepared to support that project until, excuse me, BC Housing basically changed the rules at the last minute as far as who the clients would be. And that caused council to back away from the project. It caused the province to look unfavorably upon us, I'm sure. It also caused distrust, I think I can say, at the council table of dealing with BC Housing. And I'm quick to point out that there was different staff people involved at that time. So the other thing that I would suggest was erroneous, and maybe I misheard Councillor Manley, was your suggestion that our infamous tent city came about because of the city not going ahead with that Chase River project, which I totally reject that argument. So all of that is beside the point. I will support the recommendation that's on the floor despite my misgivings, and look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe. Let me begin firstly by saying I was happy to be the odd person out on the vote to amend the motion tonight for this simple reason. I'm the mayor of this city. I signed a memorandum on behalf of this city, this council, and its citizens with BC Housing. That's my signature that appears on it. If we had wished to raise the issue of having a Citizens Advisory Council, we had an opportunity to do so and demand that it be in writing, and we didn't do it. For me, it is about good faith. And I'm not suggesting the rest of council doesn't have good faith, but I take my signature and my word as my bond, and I take it seriously. And I take it particularly seriously when we're talking tonight about providing housing for 60 people, when we're still all reasonably informed, but notwithstanding the official count that's been referred to many times in this chamber and by the media, our staff and those on the front lines estimate it's probably more like 800 or 900 or 1,000 citizens in a small city of 107,000 have no place to sleep every night of every week, every day of the year. I fully appreciate that no one is going to leave this room tonight who wasn't already supportive of the motion being changed by anything I'm going to say. A lot of people here tonight will be marking this down and looking forward to the next election, as people do, and make sure that their X will go beside any other name than mine or certain members of this council, and I must tell you, I'm okay with that. And one of the reasons is simply this. One of my old friends is here tonight, a person for whom I have enormous respect, former United Church minister. I'm reminded of the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I realize bringing up Christian themes may not appeal to a lot of people. But collectively, as a society, in this province in particular, I won't talk about the rest of the country, we have passed by the injured soul on the side of the road far too often. We have all kinds of excuses for doing it, not in my neighborhood, doesn't affect my family, it'll drive down my property prices. These are people who have made bad decisions, they're dangerous, they're unworthy. You know, the concept of the deserving and undeserving poor is still with us, alive and well, unfortunately, in the 21st century. There comes a point at which you have to say, politicians, elected members of council, cannot always accept and advocate only for one neighborhood at a time, because many people, indeed, I hate to say it, probably there's not a neighborhood in this community that would welcome any kind of facility to deal with the poor souls who now, night after night, sleep in our streets. I don't say that as a criticism, it's just an accepted bit of cynicism that's come with age. So for me tonight, this is not a tough decision. I appreciate Ms. Cardinelli's arguments, and I have read all the emails, and I suspect many of the authors are with us tonight in this audience, just as some are listening at home. I've read your emails, I hear your concerns, I understand your concerns, but my dear citizens, this is not going to improve if we continue to expect that somehow people are going to get better on their own, or that by turning down something because it doesn't meet the perfect standard, we're going to get the province to do something different. With great respect, when Councillor Armstrong says she's not prepared to support it because it's not for it's not going to help the poor. It's not for people who wish to be dry and sober. I get that, but you know what? Everyone here by now, and I've been 5.5 years in this chair in this city, must understand cities are not going to solve this problem. They are not going to build community facilities that will enable the sick to get better. We're not going to staff or house everybody. We are not going to change the responsibility of the city and deliver mental health and addiction services. We're not going to look after the significant portion of our population who are now suffering from brain injury, many of whom hit the streets because of that and now suffer even worse conditions because of the toxic drug supply, because of being brought back with naloxone instead of literally being left to die in the streets. So I get it. I am extremely sympathetic, and many of you will say, what's Krogh got to worry about? They won't be sticking one in his neighborhood. Well, I have to tell you, there's a nice piece of property right behind our house on Nayland and Bay that would probably be suitable in size. And I'm not advocating for it, and I wouldn't be able to vote on it anyway. But you know what? There are very few sites in this city that are of suitable size, location, bus routes, whatever. We can argue till the cows come home. There will be no perfect sites. And in the meantime, to paraphrase President Obama, we must not let the pursuit of the perfect stand in the way of doing the good. As frustrating as it may be, as upsetting as it will be, as fearful it would be, I don't know for sure what the future is going to bring. But I know today there's probably not one of you in this room who doesn't have a family member who's got a mental health issue, who's probably had a brain injury or has an addiction or a potential addiction. Some of you may have happy teenagers at home, and your son's going to wake up when they're 19 one morning having visions and hearing voices, and will get diagnosed with schizophrenia and may or may not get the kind of health and help that they need. There but for the grace of God go any of us. So I just want to say, friends, citizens of Nanaimo, I hope this council will support this tonight. It is a step forward. It is a small portion of our homeless population, but I guarantee you, in the longer haul, there may be suffering in the meantime. There will be challenges in the neighborhood. I'm confident, however, in the people who are going to deliver the services at this facility, that overall, we will be a better place for it, and the lives of 60 people at a minimum, because this is going to be for a couple of years. They won't be there for 2 years necessarily. They may be there for a few months until they're ready to move into something better and safer and have the ability to do so. We're going to improve immeasurably the lives of our fellow citizens. And that, my friends, is the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's how I want to end tonight. I know it's hard. I know it's frustrating. I've commented already about you're worried about your property, you're worried about crime, you're worried about theft, you're worried about influences on your children and your families. But again, it's not going to get better unless we take steps. And this tonight is just one step of many. There have been announcements. There are facilities in this community that function well without causing any issues in their neighborhood. Give this time. Let us not respond, I won't say hysterically, but out of an unbased concern about what may be when we know what exists. So, with that, if I've inspired anybody else on council, so be it, but otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion. Councillors Eastmere, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Perino, Councillor Brown, Councillor Manley, Councillor Armstrong opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much for the vigorous debate, everyone. It is much appreciated. We are on to item 12C, the liquor license application number LA 156-2373, Rosstown Road. Mr. Holm, please.
Your Worship, I think you missed B.
Sorry?
You missed item B.
Oh, pardon me. How could I forget criminal record checks? Sorry, I put so many notes in my sheet tonight. Criminal record checks and fingerprinting fees. Your time to shine, Ms. Gurry. Tell us about this, or we're going to go to Ms.
It's going to be Ms. Robertson's time to shine. I'm going to turn it over to her, but just a brief little update or introduction is this comes before you based on a motion way back from the previous council in 2018, and with some staff leaving, et cetera, we finally picked this up, and so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Robertson to walk you through her report.
Ms. Robertson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council. Try to make this quick, but there is some options here that I just want to make sure the Council's fully aware of. And so basically tonight before you are some options to amend the RCMP fees and charges bylaw to address an issue that was brought forward by a delegation in 2018. And in particular, they were looking for council to waive the municipal portion of the fingerprinting fee. And it gets a little bit complex here, but particularly in cases where one's identity has to be confirmed when their gender and date of birth matches that of a convicted sexual offender during the process. Options are also being provided to amend the fees for conducting criminal record checks to bring them more in line with the comparator group of municipalities. So currently the fee for criminal record check done at the Nanaimo detachment for employment purposes is $25. If that employment involves working with the elderly, the sick, disabled, or young, a more rigorous vulnerable sector check is conducted. If during that check an individual's gender and date of birth matches that of a convicted sexual offender, their identity must be confirmed, and the only way that that can be done is through the fingerprinting process, which prompts an additional $50 fee. That fee is broken up into two parts. 25 of it is the RCMP fee, which is basically an access to the federal RCMP database. The other 25 is the municipal portion, which covers off some of the costs associated with administering the process. Volunteers or nonprofit groups who need to undergo that same vulnerable record check are only charged $10, and this fee includes the fingerprinting process if it's necessary. So typically there's about 25 that are employment related a day that are applied for, and then there's 10 for volunteers. And of those 35, about 4 or 5 a day will come up with the gender and date matching that of a convicted sexual offender. And this figure might seem alarming. However, the primary reason is because previously convicted sexual offenders were allowed to legally change their name. That is no longer the case now, but there's still a number that have. So currently the RCMP will waive its $25 portion of the $50 fee once the identity has been confirmed. However, there's no provision in the city's fees and charges bylaw to waive the municipal portion. And this is what the delegation brought forward. He felt that that fee was unfair. So when staff looked into this to get a better understanding, we wanted to see how other RCMP detachments did this, because it certainly is not isolated to Nanaimo only. And so we surveyed the 12 comparator municipalities that we've used for other surveys. And we also wanted to see what their fees were, because when we checked the bylaw, we looked and saw that the fees had not undergone a change in over 20 years.
Excuse me, Ms. Robertson. Madam, at the back of the room, take that sign down. I'm not going to ask a third time. I'm asking a second time, however. Take that sign down. It is offensive, and it breaches the rules that govern the conduct in this room. Thank you. Ms. Robertson.
All right. So 10 of the 12 municipalities did charge their the municipal fee, but 2 did not. They just simply included it bulk-wise in the overall fee. So in cases when fingerprinting was required, the average charge is $107, and this is after factoring in the RCMP waiving its fee, and the city only charges $50.
Give them one more time.
So Nanaimo is currently the lowest of all the 12 municipalities surveyed, and given the results, if council were to retain the existing criminal record check fee but consider also adding some waiver provisions as requested by the delegation, the city would lose approximately $30,000 a year. And this would put Nanaimo even further behind, but nonetheless, that option was put forward for your consideration as option number 1. Alternatively, if council were to move towards being the closer of the average of the comparative municipalities and not consider including any waivers, because no other RCMP detachments do, the increase would go from $50 to $105 for those that require the mandatory fingerprinting. And this scenario is outlined in option 3 and would provide a revenue increase of $144,000 a year. So, if council wanted to at least move towards an average rate and still provide the option for waiving the municipal fee, there are 2 options being presented for consideration, which are options 2 and 4. Option 2 would see the criminal record check fee increase from 25 to 55, which would put Nanaimo, if we were to adopt it, at just a little lower than the average of $58.14. then there would be the further $50 charge, but then it would turn around and be waived. So it's basically an administrative process. Option 4, which is a bit more of a streamlined version of option 2, it would still achieve the same goal of coming a little closer to the average of the fees charged by the comparator group, but the fee wouldn't parse out the fingerprinting fee for vulnerable sector checks when there's a match. And the advantage to that is that it makes it less discriminatory, but it might not be quite as transparent as where the fees go. So this is being put forward as the preferred option, but really option 2 or 4 would achieve the same thing. Just depends on whether or not you want to see that fee go in or out, so you can perhaps look at it for future considerations when the next review comes for an increase. So the volunteer nonprofit fee was left as is because it's in line with what other detachment charge, and what I call the regular fingerprinting fee, travel documentation, et cetera, also remains unchanged, because if we were to go with the comparator group, it would put it at $75, which would surpass the proposed increase fee of $55. So if council were to select one of the 4 options outlined, we would come back to the next council meeting with the direction provided tonight and bring the bylaw amendment forward, unless there's further direction that council wants to provide.
Ms. Robertson, thorough job as usual. Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Robertson. I had to read this report several times because I found it convoluted but well written. My question is there a difference between the amount of staff time needed to process these requests between option 2 and option 4?
No.
Okay, thank you. Then I would just comment, Your Worship, through you, if I may, that recently we did a review of our overall fees and licenses. Thank you, Your Worship. Because we had fallen way behind in what we charged. And I think it's quite reasonable that we do the same thing here and bring us into a comparative with other cities. So I will be looking at either option 2 or option 4, depending on how council wishes to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Perino.
Thank you. Would the provisions of the LEAP program apply for some of these? Because I know quite often, well, this is a few years ago, mind you, we would have people come in that couldn't afford it, and they would have to get loans or borrow to pay for this.
Volunteers or nonprofits?
No, this is for employment.
For employment?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't, if it's
So
for
like,
employment
because
purposes, no.
there are a lot of people that require a fingerprint check for employment, and they don't pay for it. The employee has to pay for it, and some of them, or like the employee or the applicant, some of them can't afford it. So would the LEAP provisions apply for them to get a reduced rate?
That's not something I've looked into. I know that there are provisions for other grants or something, but that's for nonprofit societies, isn't it? Yeah, so it's not something that I looked into in terms of the LEAP program and how that might be affected.
That's just a concern I have, because especially for like an 18 or 19-year-old starting out that doesn't have a lot of money, or their family doesn't, $50 can be a lot of money for them to, get a job. So just a concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll put the motion of option number 4 on the, if I get a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Brown.
And thank you to Councillor Armstrong for your comments, because, often it's the employer who is hiring who will pay that cost, because they're demanding that the person has to have their record check done. However, a great option for a volunteer group to do at some point, especially for younger people who are starting out in their career. Yeah, a little bit tougher, but I think it's time that we did bring the fees in, and I like what you've done, especially about people who their names are possibly mixed in an issue that they can't avoid, but it's criminally done. So I appreciate that there's no cost for that.
Thank you very much. No further speakers. Motion's on the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll go on to liquor license application number LA 156-2373 Rosstown Road. Mr. Holm, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a notice just advising council that we're in the process of reviewing a liquor license application for the Nanaimo Theatre. It's a property outlined in red overhead or on the screen. That's the Bailey Theatre, Nanaimo Theatre Group, and the Liquor Control Regulation Branch requires, there's two options for those seeking a liquor license application. The council can choose to opt out of undertaking a public consultation process, which places greater onus and longer process requirements on applicants, or council can choose to provide comment after considering input from potential impacts to residents from the proposed liquor license. We're just notifying that we're processing the application at this point. We'd be proceeding with a 100-meter notification radius from the property. Just a couple details on what's proposed. The Old Bailey, or sorry, the Bailey Theatre, the Nanaimo Theatre Group hosts approximately 16 plus events per year approximately. They are looking at a liquor license with hours proposed from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. to serve liquor at events, potentially up to 302 patrons at any event is the capacity that they're allowed to provide for there. So following this consideration, this is just for information purposes, but we would be bringing back a report to council for consideration after seeking input from surrounding residents. And we're actually looking at, I'll speak to this a little bit later as well, but looking to streamline this process a little bit. It's quite a bit of a time-consuming and onerous process. It appears at council several times, and in cases like this, it's something that is not really impactful to the community, and we're looking to in the future streamline this process a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone wishing to speak with respect to liquor license application number LA 156-2373 Rosstown Road? Not seeing any. Just for report only. Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Appreciated. The next item is 12D, Development Variance Permit Application number DVP 464-1610 Lote Street. Mr. Holm again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a relatively minor variances to minimum front and flanking side yard requirements for property on Lote Street in the Departure Bay neighborhood. It's outlined in red. The proposal is a two-story single-family dwelling and accessory building. Variances are shown on site survey on attachment C, and if you could bring up attachment C and D. Attachment D also includes rendering of the, you see the variances outlined there, proposed variances, and D shows the renderings of the proposed dwelling. Notifications taken place as required, and happy to take any questions on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions, but anyone wishing to speak with respect to Development Variance Permit Application number DVP 464-1610 Lote Street? Please. Yep, come up to the mic, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, Mayor, councilors. I live adjacent to this new property being developed. There is, if you look at the map, it says 2nd Street on the map, and there's 2nd Street actually is our driveway that we go into our property with.
I think you mean Fairbanks.
Correct. It's actually Fairbanks. You're right. Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to say we're a long way from 2nd Street.
Map way back in the day. So there are, currently there are existing trees on that property. It's city property. We have an amendment to that property so we can access our property because the garage that was built before us purchasing the house, it was already existing. So having said that, over the years, we've lived there for the past 13 years, and we've had one of the neighbors behind us, he hired an arborist to cut the branches down on the trees so he can open up the view for his property. And my neighbor noticed it happening. She phoned the city. City came down with the arborist, put a stop to it right away. I don't know if the fellow was fined or not, but we're going through the same process with this fellow that just purchased the lot next to that, our place. So he came in with an arborist and started cutting branches on the trees. I spoke to him just prior to him doing this, and he, as far as I know, because in speaking to the arborist from the city, you're allowed to cut branches that overhang on your property. This fellow went up the tree, started cutting branches off one side of the tree completely, right up to the trunk of the tree. Now I understand why. When I look at the plan that he has set forth, that his house is pushed forward, that just opens the view up to his property so he can see Departure Bay. My wife and I are very diligent at looking after these trees because of all the issues we've had with the previous neighbors. So now this guy just comes in on city property, starts cutting branches off. So after that, we phoned the arborist. Initially, with our first neighbor, we phoned Alan Kemp. He was a city arborist, now retired. So he put a stop to it. And he said, in the words of Alan Kemp, he said, if I let everybody in Nanaimo cut down trees, open up the view so they can see, there wouldn't be any trees left. So this fella did the same thing. After I see that his rendering and his drawings, I see why he did it. And when I approached him after, because we were home at the day that it was being cut, it was in December, and I heard this chainsaw running. My wife looked out the window and she goes, "Oh my God, all the branches are gone on the one side of the tree." I went out there, I put a stop to it. It's like, "What's going on?" Oh, I got carried away. So our main concern is, I phoned the arborist again, and I said, building this building this close to the property, and having the foundation that close to the property, does it have a direct effect on the health of the trees on this property? So that's my argument. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? None? Thank you. Again, if you could introduce yourself for the record, please.
I will indeed. My name is Philip Baker. I own the house with the largest fence border with the proposed property. I'm here with my lovely partner, Kim, and I apologize for initially arriving late. Our 11-month-old baby got into some blueberries, and so bath time took a little bit longer than we expected. I also want the record to show that we did not hire the arborist, nor did our other neighbor, Jake. That was a different neighbor who is actually up on Glen Eyre, so further away from the property. We do want to stand in opposition to this in three parts, largely because of setback, because of the height, and because of potential intended use. Both my wife and I are young medical professionals. We don't have experience with building, but over the weekend we were able to dig into the paperwork that we received here and found some discrepancies considering Nanaimo's bylaws, and I actually have some of those listed out for you if you'd like. The accessory building on the rear of the property is currently listed as 3.83 meters in height on subsection 6.6.3, that the height of an accessory building should not exceed 3 meters. So that is like in violation there. I find it strange that there is a setback or a proposed variance for the setback, but not for the height of the building. And so I just question if there are other things that are trying to be rushed through here that might be concerning for the property. Current elevation of the roof is currently listed at 42.45 meters above sea level, which means that the current property, the ground is at 12 meters above sea level. I double-checked this on maps as well as went with my own hiking GPS to be able to correlate the height of the property. With the building standing 12 meters taller than the ground is today, that actually would lead to some significant height challenges with the building. And from my perusal of the bylaws, principal building maximum height must be less than 9 meters. And so therefore, I believe that this does not meet criteria there. We do have some concern about intended use as well. the current size of the accessory building is quite large, which does have some concern that this might be used as an additional house, as a carriage home. In talking with community members that we are friends with in the community, they did indicate that they might actually know the current people who put this proposal forward, and that they also own Airbnb properties, both within Nanaimo as well as in other communities within Vancouver Island. And so that's just a concern that when we live in a community that has 5 houses that have children that are under the age of 5 that border on this property, that this would be a transient rental. And that doesn't really contribute to the fabric of our apologies. Transient renters from an Airbnb.
Excuse me, sir. Addressing the audience is not going to help your statements.
Okay. Sorry.
It's council that makes the decision.
Stay focused. Our neighborhood's vibrancy comes from its character, its families, and the community feel that's there. Short-term renters don't help contribute to that. I do also have concerns about the trees that are there within the setback variance and how the proposed foundations are right on top of the roots of those trees. We live in a climate crisis. There's increasing heat. We're having urban heat island effects. And there's incredibly beneficial things of having large, mature trees within the city of Nanaimo. And I think that adds important value to the community. And so I worry about those trees. I do have like different options and different things that like I wish I had the opportunity to bring forward with the people who submitted this request for variance. But we would ask the City Council to obtain or provide detailed clarification on the maximum allowable height for the buildings that are within this zone and to ensure that the proposed building complies with these regulations. I'd also request that for all proper surveying and planning documents relating to the variance to be completed and checked. And I'd also request for a maximum height to be from the elevation of the common road, which is Lote Street, rather than an elevated slab. I strongly believe that good fences make good neighbors. And when we first moved into our property, one of the first things I did was reach out to my next door neighbor and met Jake. And then we went behind and met our wonderful neighbors, Al and Kim. Our neighborhood really creates the community creates the vibrancy of our neighborhood. And having this proposal go forward without a chance for us to talk about it first, I really wish this could have been resolved without coming before you. And unfortunately, this is the only avenue of conversation that I've had with this proposal. So we would stand in opposition. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, do you have a question?
Don't worry about it.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
No.
No? Thank you. Councillor Manley?
Yeah, just a clarification from staff, because when I'm looking at this report, I'm seeing a variance for the setbacks, but I'm not seeing a variance for height. Is there an issue with the height of the building? Is there a variance for that?
No, that would be confirmed through the, what's proposed is in compliance with the bylaw, but obviously through the building permitting process, if this were to move on to that stage, the bylaw requirements would be reconfirmed there as well. But yeah, the height as proposed is within bylaw provisions as it's shown on the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong?
Just a question for staff, but just to confirm that the only thing that we're allowed to deal with right now is the actual variance requested. It's not about trees, it's not about anything, it's only about the variance requested, which nobody has discussed yet, correct?
The requested variances are set back to front yard and flanking side yard. Yeah, the implications related to trees and...
But my question is, that's the only thing we can consider at this time, not the other points that were raised.
The concerns about the tree
Yes.
limbing, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sir, did you wish to speak?
Yes.
And you've heard the drill. If you can introduce yourself for the record, please.
All right, my name's Jake, and I live at 2570 Lindburn Crescent. Just a couple concerns I have on the variances that are being proposed would be to the front. I know Lote Street has like a ditch for the perimeter drain and everything in that neighborhood. So my one concern there would be they're proposing to move the house forward, and I think there'll still be enough room there to stay away from the ditch. But with being behind that property, I'm curious of where my perimeter drain actually goes through. And I was able to pull up the city map, and it just shows the sewer main, which makes sense, because how can we track all the perimeter drains? But I did want to bring that up. I want to discuss, you know, how that will be maintained and replaced if it does go through that construction zone. And I did notice too that the city sanitary cuts through the back corner of that lot, kind of where they're proposing the driveway pad to enter the garage. And I'm raising concern on how that city sanitary will be serviced or maintained with a concrete pad and driveway on top of it. And I guess I'm also asking, are the reasons that we are just, or that they're proposing the variance is just for a covered deck? And is it also so they can build the proposed garage? Because if they had to follow the required bylaws and the setbacks, would there be room for that garage at the back? Those are the points that I wanted to raise, which touches on the variances on the side flanking and the front yard. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holm, can you answer some of this?
Sure, yes. So the requested variance is actually because of the unconstructed roadway adjacent to the property. The setback requirement is 4.5 meters, or sorry, 4 meters, whereas if this were an adjacent property, so if it weren't unconstructed road and just were an adjacent property, they could build to the 1.5 meters as proposed. The garage, the location of the proposed garage is somewhat restricted by the sanitary right-of-way that the last speaker mentioned. I'm sure they could relocate it in a slightly different location, but it is somewhat impinged by the sanitary sewer right-of-way. They could probably reduce that. It's kind of hypothetical to say, could they build it or could they not? They could build a garage in a different location, slightly different location, but it is, the location of it is somewhat impinged by the sanitary right-of-way as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong, you left over? Okay. There is a recommended motion. Would someone care to make it? Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Hemmens. Discussion on this? It's only on the variance. Councillor Brown?
Just a quick question through to staff. There's no building elevations in the package, is there? There was just reference to heights and things like that, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing something.
That's correct. It's just referenced in the table.
Okay, so like elevation, but not building. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they reference, the drawings reference the maximum permitted height, but not the proposed height. The building height, unless varied, would have to meet the bylaw requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Perino?
Very quickly, Your Worship, just through to you, to Mr. Holmes. The issue of trees, height, suite, garage, those will be dealt with, not necessarily trees, but I mean, they'll be dealt with at the building permit. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, through Your Worship to Councillor Perino,
Okay.
that's correct.
So
Those would all be confirmed through the building permitting
Okay.
process.
So all we're doing tonight is voting on the variance at this point.
That's correct. The
Okay.
flanking side yard and front yard setback variance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Motion's on the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you to the people who spoke. The next is E, Development Permit Application Number DP 1317-4670 Hammond Bay Road. Again, Mr. Holm, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a proposed development permit for quite a large property, 3.76 hectares in all, off Hammond Bay Road, adjacent to Piper's Pub. 34 units are proposed in 15 buildings. You can see the property outlined in red there. If you could please bring up attachment C and then moving on to attachment D at some point as well. That'll give you an idea of what's being built there. So 34 units in 15 buildings. This is a steep slope residential zone property. You can see that the development's been concentrated to the northeastern portion of the site. You can see there's significant wetlands, water courses that impact sort of the south and west portion of the site. So they've concentrated the development outside of the required watercourse setbacks, and are actually proposing to dedicate a significant portion of the property. You can see that on the next attachment D. You'll see that a significant portion of the property, approximately 44%, is proposed to be dedicated as park, and the development concentrated on the remainder. So the proposed wetland setbacks are respected through the development contemplated here. These are three bedroom units proposed. Again, 34 units in total. Access would be from Ney Drive. You can see that on the top of the screen there, access from Ney Drive, so not being accessed from Hammond Bay Road. That portion of the property would be dedicated as park. There are proposed connections included too to Wally Creek Trail System through the development, and as well some height variances are proposed for units, varied height variances, 4 units outlined in the table within the staff report. I'm happy to speak to any of that. So decent multifamily infill, family-sized 3-bedroom units, close proximity to schools, amenities and pedestrian facilities, trails in the area, and preservation of significant environmentally sensitive land within the parcel protected through this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Holm? Councillor Eastmer, then Councillor Perino.
Thank you. Through you, just wondering if you could just elaborate on the portion that is being turned to the city to turn into parkland, and there's a preservation aspect of this.
Sure, thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Perino. Councillor Eastmer. This would be, so the portion outside of the developed area, the sort of tan portion of the property, so that's largely environmentally sensitive, protected by watercourse setbacks, proposed to be dedicated as park. So that would be turned over to the city as park dedication should the proposal move forward through to building permit application and construction.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I will say we did receive some emails from members of the public about the natural value of this land with birds nesting on it, etc. It's good that the wetland portion is protected, of course, by our own regulations, so happy to see that, and it is good family-oriented density in this area. I'll just speak to the Design Advisory Panel's recommendations, which included and led to the addition of raised sidewalks and pedestrian crossings, which is great, a better model of short-term bike racks, and the addition of a landscape feature at the intersection, which includes conifer trees, as well as river rocks and boulders, and some decorative stamping in the concrete. So thank you to the Design Advisory Panel for those additions to this project.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. The majority of the discussion tonight is really about the variance. Is that correct?
Yes, effectively, that's the discretionary approval.
Okay.
The development itself is consistent with the guidelines applicable.
Yes.
So that's the development permit area guidelines applicable to steep slopes, and as well as general multifamily form and character.
Yes.
Yeah. So that part of it is if it's consistent with the guidelines, effectively, it's the correct course would be to approve the development. The variances, minor height variances, are requested to buildings within the development. You can see those outlined on the screen here.
Right. No, I just wanted to say, Your Worship, the variance requests are quite minimal, And just thrilled to see 34 townhouses, family homes near schools. Oh, sidewalks, raised sidewalks, I think an excellent development.
Ms. Cardinelli, I'm not going to ask you again. I realize you think this is amusing and you wish to make a point and draw attention to and you, sir, stop clapping or you'll be out of here as well. This is a council room. I'm not going to ask again.
Anyway, Your Worship, I'd be prepared to put the motion on the floor.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock?
Question to staff. You know, I know it's near Wally Creek, and there's the wetlands and that. And there was a letter from the stream keepers that have worked in the area extensively. And I just curious, was there any consideration in terms of, and I'm not sure if it's the appropriate state of the development, but that are looking at sort of like the permeability of surfaces, and has that already been sort of taken into consideration in this design as just a slow water flow so that it's not kind of all rushing off the concrete surfaces into the wetland areas?
Yeah, through your worship to Councilor Gesselbrook, yeah, it would be at this stage, and then further on as the plans are developed. The city actually has quite well-developed and progressive engineering standards related to managing stormwater on site and ensuring that you're talking about the peak flows to the watercourses are moderated, sort of mimicking pre-development levels. So yeah, we would be looking at, and through the development permit, would have considered the moderation of stormwater flows into the watercourses to mimic pre-development levels, and that review would continue, and the details would evolve when the civil engineering design review takes place through building permit.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I know we've got, you know, established engineering standards in that, and I think that's just an important consideration to make sure that it gets carried throughout the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any further speakers. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is 12F, rezoning application number RA 498-5360 Bergen-Op-Zoom Drive. Mr. Holm, again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, the property outlined in red on the screen. This is located between Metro Drive and the Island Highway and access through Bergen-Op-Zoom Drive. The property is designated residential corridor in the city plan, the official community plan. This is an application by Tony Harris Development, Inc. To rezone the property from R1 to R8, so a medium density multifamily zone to permit in concept what's proposed as 2 5-story residential buildings of 168 units. In this case, a public hearing is prohibited under recent provincial legislative changes, as the proposal is 100% residential. Anything greater than 50% residential, council is prohibited from holding a public hearing. Notice was published advising that council be considering readings of the bylaw on June 27th. And as well, earlier in the process, a public information meeting was held on February 9th. To consider comments from the public. That was a developer-hosted public information meeting to consider comments from the public earlier in the development review phase. And yeah, if you could bring up attachment C and attachment D, you can get a sense of how the site is proposed to be developed in concept here. Attachment D shows the building perspectives as contemplated here. What's proposed as well are community amenity contribution in kind in this case, public pathway improvements and improvements to upgrade Bergen-Op-Zoom Drive to include pedestrian and cycling facilities, as well as pedestrian connections to adjacent development on Dublin Way. The applicable community amenity contribution rate under council's current community amenity contribution policy, it would be $41 per square meter, which would amount to approximately $625,000 based on the concept. It's estimated that the in-kind contribution would exceed that, but if this is approved as a condition of approval, staff would recommend securing a covenant to ensure that at least the in-kind, the greater, I guess, value of the $41 per square meter, or the in-kind contributions proposed were secured through this proposal. Number of other minor items, including road dedication, recommended to be secured. I'm happy to touch on any of that. The proposal is adding much-needed housing in the area. It's close to great active transportation infrastructure and services, and very much in line with the official community plan policy for the property. I'm happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. I'm not seeing any questions. Councillor Hemmons, please.
Your Worship, I'd like to move that zoning amendment bylaw 2024 number 4500.227 to rezone 5360 Bergen-op-Zoom Drive from single dwelling residential R1 to medium density residential R8 pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
I move that the bylaw pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Eastmere. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And I move that the bylaw pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And I move that council direct staff to secure the conditions related to zoning amendment bylaw 2024 number 4500.227 as outlined in the conditions of rezoning section of the staff report titled rezoning application number RA 498-5360 Bergen-op-Zoom Drive, dated 2024 July 8th, prior to final adoption.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. On to G, Integrated Action Plan 2024 Neighborhood Association Priority Request. Mr. Holm again.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. This represents the first full cycle of a process that engages neighborhood associations in identifying requested priority actions for their areas. This is an initiative that's supported by city plan policy, the official community plan policy, as well as Council's neighborhood association supports policy. And Council would be familiar that, as many of you participated, an engagement event was held May 22nd with the neighborhood associations to look at reviewing the priority action items that through the initial stage of this program they put forward in 2023. So requested actions in priority actions in their area, and updating those. The engagement session in May was to consider updating those requested actions for the 2024 and sort of the 4-year period from 2024. The previous, the initial list, the 2023 requested actions are included as attachment A. The updated 2024 requested priority actions for neighborhood associations are included as attachment B. It's quite an innovative approach to engaging with neighborhood associations and identifying the priorities in their areas that they'd like to see action on. These would, if endorsed by council, would form an appendix to the city's integrated action plan and would be available for consideration for inclusion in capital planning, as well as a budgeting process and development of work plans. And some of these items would actually be addressed through the normal course of business or actions or other projects that the city has underway, but it puts together a kind of a cohesive list of what we understand to be and have vetted as the recommended requested priority actions for neighborhood associations in their areas. I'm happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for all of the work that went into this, and I really appreciated attending the neighborhood association meeting where these priorities were discussed. My question is about the Chase River Community Association's third point, which says to increase community fire safety by staffing both fire trucks at fire station number 4. And I did touch base with the fire chief about that, and he said essentially they don't have 2 fire trucks there. So if this is just an example of one, if it becomes a moot point, and is there an opportunity for them to amend that and to add a different priority?
I think, Your Worship, I think because, as Mr. Holmes said, these are sort of a 4-year rotating plan, I think there's an opportunity every year to review these. So if these are, in fact, what the neighborhood associations have identified, even if some of them are not achievable or not easily resolved, or some maybe don't make sense, I think it's better off that council not be amending the neighborhood's priorities, but instead, when we report back next year, I think we can update them at that time.
Yeah, I see what you're saying in that, and because they have a chance annually to come back and review it, then we can amend it at that time, and if in the meantime, I'm sure there's flexibility in the document to be able to do that. Mr. Holm?
Thank you, and yeah, I should have added further clarity, probably would have addressed the question earlier through Your Worship to Councillor Eastmere. So yeah, this list has been reviewed with the neighborhood associations, but has not every item has been fully vetted. That will take some time, and there will be opportunity to come back and check in with the neighborhood associations as we progress through, and then again annually as you referenced to update the lists is the plan going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I'll move the recommended motion, Your Worship.
We have a seconder with Councillor Perino. Any discussion?
If I could just say
Sure,
very
please.
briefly, I want to shout out to some committee members that participated over 8 years ago in the creation of these events, and it was really, the impetus was that there wasn't a mechanism for neighborhood associations to have direct connection with council, and so there are a number of community members floating out there who we don't get to see a lot, and they actually had a big hand in doing this. So I want to say thanks to them. I want to say thanks to staff for a really productive evening. To have neighborhood associations say these are our top 3 priorities and then get an annual update from the city to say this is where we're at, this is what we've done, this is what is still remaining, and then for them to get the ability to adapt and grow, and I just think it's a brilliant program, and I'm really glad we're doing it, so thank you.
I would second that if that were a motion, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. I'm noting the hour. Time for a break for staff and everyone. We'll take the evening break now. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll come back to
Council is aware, so every cannabis retail store in the city that's been established has to go through a rezoning process, so a lengthy process involving public engagement and criteria that council established in 2018 through the cannabis retail store rezoning policy. That's included as attachment A to the report. The criteria for rezoning are outlined there. Unfortunately, that process doesn't satisfy the liquor and cannabis regulation branch's requirements should there be an amendment to a cannabis retail store license. So a change in the licensee, for instance, which is the case with an upcoming application. So even though the city goes through an extensive process engaging the community and specifically rezoning each location that has a cannabis retail store, so it considers the land use approvals very carefully. What the Liquor Control and Regulation Branch requires is that local governments engage the community again for comment for any amendment to a cannabis retail store license. So it's quite an onerous. We've tried to find our way around it with the Liquor Control and Regulation Branch, and we've come up with, staff has developed a streamlined policy that will satisfy the Liquor Control and Regulation Branch's requirements, because in this case, council has very carefully considered every location from a land use perspective. In this case, this policy would only apply to those locations that have been vetted through that process, rezoned, very careful consideration there as to where they should appropriately be located in community. Now what this policy would deal with is simply a change to a cannabis retail store license. So really nothing that should concern, it's the operator of the store, really nothing that should concern residents. It doesn't really change the nature of the land use. But attachment B to the report includes a draft streamlined policy that would have a simplified process to gather the views of residents to meet the liquor control and regulation branch requirements. This would involve web posting for 7 days, soliciting public input prior to council consideration. If you have any questions about the policy, I'm happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Any questions, council? Not seeing any. Councillor Hibbins, moving the recommended motion?
I'd move the recommended motion, yeah.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. That completes reports. On to bylaws. The first is Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw 2024, number 7370. Councillor Hibbins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw 2024, number 7370, to provide for highway closure and dedication removal of a portion of Northfield Road adjacent to 2300 Northfield Road be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next is 13B, Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw 2024, number 7372. Is there anyone wishing to speak regarding Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw 2024, number 7372? Not seeing any. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I move that Highway Closure and Dedication Removal Bylaw 2024, number 7372, to provide for highway closure and dedication removal of a portion of Bryden Street adjacent to 266 and 268 Bryden Street pass third reading.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next is item C, Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw, bracket Downtown 2024, number 7384. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I move that Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw Downtown 2024, number 7384, a bylaw to establish a revitalization tax exemption program for the downtown for a 5-year period, be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next is D, Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw, bracket Hotel and Motel 2024, number 7385. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I move that Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw Hotel and Motel 2024, number 7385, a bylaw to establish a revitalization tax exemption program for the hotels and motels for a 5-year period, be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Item E, Respectful Spaces Bylaw 2024, number 7381. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I move that Respectful Spaces Bylaw 2024, number 7381, a bylaw to promote a safe, healthy, respectful, and positive environment for members of the public, volunteers, council, and staff be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. F, Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7159, decimal 20. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I move that Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7159.20, a bylaw to assign fines for violations against the Respectful Spaces Bylaw be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Item G, Officer Designation and Delegation of Authority Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7353, decimal 02.
Thank you. I move that Officer Designation and Delegation of Authority Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7353.02, a bylaw to reference the Respectful Spaces Bylaw and Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaws within Schedule A and to update staff titles be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And finally, H, Off-Street Parking Regulations Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7266, decimal 03.
Thank you, Worship. I move that Off-Street Parking Regulations Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7266.03, to implement amendments related to transit-oriented areas, Bill 47, housing statutes, and associated regulations be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion. Oh, pardon me, Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Thorpe opposed. Oh, thank God, we've broken the monotony. The motion still carries. Thank you. The next is item 14, correspondence. The first is correspondence refunding support for shelter space in the city of Nanaimo. Nothing flowing from it. Next is correspondence dated 2024, June 26, from the Honorable Ravi Kahlon, Minister of Housing, reproposed housing target order. All right, we are on to notices of motion. None have been made. We're on to other business. And Councillor Gesselbrock, your motion.
I'd like to move the motion. Screen there.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Brown. Councillor Gesselbrock, you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I think we can still, there's work to be done on our current investment policy to better align with our current goals and values of our official community plan. And I think, asking for just a report on this, basically updating the numbers from the report that was made on 2021 with 2024 numbers so that we can evaluate sort of what we're willing to engage in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown and Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I sit on the MFA board, and every year they do the AGM, where they give a sort of an overview of the yearly activities in the different funds. And one of the things they did was quite interesting. They did go into their ESG fund and talked about the annual performance. And they're very clear: don't draw any conclusions because it's not obviously as mature as a lot of their other funds. But it was just very interesting to see the comparison between the two, and I won't spend some time trying to butcher their presentation, but if this goes ahead, and I hope it does, I think it's just some good food for thought as these items get sort of digested and reworked and decisions are made over time. So there is some good information out there and some comparisons. Obviously, these are quite new funds, but I would encourage council just to be a little curious and get some of that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Don't want to sound facetious, but what would our definition of socially responsible investments be, and how much work does that mean for people to check? Like, when you start checking into somebody's that they think they are, and then you start to find out about the child labor that's involved in some of it. So that would be a concern I have, and I imagine would that be addressed in the report?
Ms. Mercer is indicating it could be, yes.
Through Your Worship. So in some of the funds, they're very, like the MFAs, they have their fossil fuel free ones. Others, it's very hard to tell exactly what is in the funds. As a municipality, we have very limited things we can invest in. Most of our investments are bank. And of course, banks invest in all kinds of things, and getting the breakdown of what they've invested in is quite difficult. So I'm not quite sure what kind of information we could get on the breakdown of those investments.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I just think this was done before, and I think the report still stands. I don't think there's a big difference, so I don't think it's worth staff time when we have a big budget coming up and stuff, so I'll be voting opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Your Worship, and a question through you to Ms. Mercer. A report was done was it 2021 was the last time? And are you able, I mean, when you invest into different groups, are you able to tell whether or not they're fossil fuel organizations or have a part of the, I guess what how would you ever know?
Yeah, so through Your Worship to Councillor Perino, some funds are very clear, specific, right. And there isn't a lot of those. There's two with the MFA,
yes,
that are specifically fossil fuel free investments. Some of the other, it's been a couple of years since we've looked, but there are still not as many out there. What we would have to do a dig and see what was out there as far as other sustainable or socially responsible investment.
Again, I mean, the report was done not long ago. It's certainly good enough for me at this time. I think, you know, it might be something that we would consider in another 3 to 5 years, or, you know, certainly in a time period that staff felt was appropriate. But I can't see the reason for it, and we certainly don't have the time or the budget for it, so I'll be voting against this as well.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thanks. Just some clarity. I think the questions raised by Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Perino sort of are exactly what the issue is that we've got over $200 million of funds that we've invested, and we don't know exactly what we're investing in. It's just sort of, you know, a GIC from a bank, and that bank could be investing, for example, one does in Barrick Gold, and Barrick Gold, you know, moved, you know, a large number of Indigenous people off their lands in a very bad way to expand a gold mine in Tanzania. But we'd never know that because it's just a GIC from X bank. Now, there are not a ton, but there are these ESG funds, which are environment, social, governance funds that basically the fund provider does the homework for the organization and says, like, this fund meets a certain standard around environmental stewardship. It meets a certain standard about social responsibility in terms of like equitable workplaces or labor forces. It's got a board of governors that's separated from the executive. The executives, you know, one thing is like overcompensation of the executives, so that you're, you know, paying millions of dollars to an executive director of a company, which is just, it's not an investment. So they do their homework on if it meets a certain standard of social responsibility to make it easy for an organization to be like, you know, we could choose between this fund that we have know nothing about because we can't tell what it's actually invested in, or we can choose this fund that has it all laid out and we can see whether it's aligned with their values or not. And I think that it's important that we do that because, you know, it's like in the 80s and 90s, the unions were investing, for example, their pension funds in companies that were shipping all the jobs overseas. And so the union members that they're trying to, you know, have their pensions, all of a sudden the job disappeared because it was all being outsourced. And so you don't want to be investing in things that's negatively impacting what your goals are. And this is what this motion is. And I don't think it's going to be a lot of work for staff. It really is updating some numbers. The report was pretty much already done, but I do think we need to know, you know, some of these funds don't provide the revenue the same compared to what the status quo is, and you might have to take a little bit of a hit depending on how much of your portfolio you want to put in, and we need to know what the numbers are. And so right now, we did pass a policy that we wanted to do this, but it's meaningless because it doesn't move any of our funds to the more socially responsible ones. And I think we just need to see what would it be like if we move 10% in or 20%, 30%, so that we can be sure that the values around environmental sustainability, around you know, equity, fair labor practices are being played out. We're choosing, and we do have a social procurement policy that does exactly that. And this is really an extension of a social procurement policy, you know, saying that these are the values we want to promote with our money, and we can no longer sort of like be ignorant or blind to the fact that this whole financial system operates, and we need to know where our money is going. I think that's the responsible thing to do, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley, then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I would just echo what Councillor Gesselbrock has said. There are a lot more of these funds coming on board. They are well managed and they are monitored, the ESG funds, and they are monitored by third parties that look for compliance to ensure that investors aren't investing in child labor or you know, in weapons or tobacco or things that are detrimental to human well-being. So I think it's worth looking into. There may be some options that have appeared since the report was done in 2021. I know just from looking myself, there's a lot more of the exchange-traded funds that fall into the ESG category. So I'm in support of ensuring that we're investing in a way that reflects our values. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just note that there is a former city councillor who posted on his blog, which I happened to see, his thoughts on this notice of motion or motion, and I won't read what he had to say, but I will share that I agreed with what he said. We're here to make decisions in the best interests of the community, and I don't think that we need to be overly swayed by those that stray into the realm of personal ideology. And to me, social responsible is in the eye of the beholder. It's different things to different people. And so we have an expert financial staff. They are limited in the areas where we as a city can invest. I'm quite comfortable with the report that was done a couple of years ago, comfortable with letting our staff go ahead and do their work without spending time on a new report. I just don't see this as being a good use of staff time, so I will not support it.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock, this will be your third time, 2 minutes.
Well, I just heard Councillor Thorpe say that he was okay that if we're investing potentially blindly in arms dealers, in large tobacco companies, in mining companies that potentially are, disturbing Indigenous communities, and, if ex-councillors think that it's okay, it's probably why they're an ex-councillor. So I appreciate you raising that point, but I do think we live in an age where we can't be willfully ignorant of where our money is, and $200 million is not insignificant, and when you add up all the municipalities in BC, it's probably over $1 billion, and all the ones in Canada, and that is a significant amount of money that can actually make a difference. And I think I got into politics for the value of trying to make a positive difference in this world, and if ex-councillors want to have the status quo, that's fine, and it's a generation that's passing, and I think we got to look forward to the future and take those bright steps. So I appreciate your comments, but I had to push back a little bit.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I saw a very interesting documentary about how investors in the financialization of the housing market were actually driving up the cost of housing, buying up low income housing units, tearing them down and putting up condos, and destroying what was affordable housing markets in places around the world. And it's important to know what your money is doing when you're investing, especially if it's something that's detrimental to the community that you're working in. And when you're facing complex problems, you don't want to be investing in things that are actually in conflict with what you're trying to achieve. And in that case, I will send you a link to the documentary. It was very interesting, and in some cases, unions were investing in this same process where their own workers couldn't afford to live in the houses that were being taken away from them and replaced by luxury condos and luxury buildings where affordable housing used to stand.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Well, every now and then, Your Worship, we're not all going to be in agreement of something, and that's okay. The reason why I'm voting against this is that our staff did a report not all that long ago. And so I just feel that their expertise is what I lean on learning from and listening to. And, they did this report, and I don't think they'd need to do it again just yet. And I just want to remind people that if you support, for example, our major airline in this country, you're supporting the use of fossil fuels. So, you got to be careful what you're talking about. But this is our staff, and they know what they're doing. Thank goodness. So I'll trust their view. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Mercer, a few questions for you. We did invest in the socially responsible MFA fund, one of them, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And what was our financial experience in that, if I may ask?
We invested $2 million in 2021, and we sold it in 2023 at a loss of $33,000.
So we lost money in following a focus on social responsibility with the citizens' money. What exactly do we have our money in now?
Mostly the money is in bank GICs. I think the majority of the portfolio right now, if not all of it, is in GICs because we are getting phenomenally good rates right now. We earned, including our bank account last year, $14 million in interest, and that, you know, was able to be put in and into a reserve and fund other things.
And our total in, Councillor Gesselbrock, I'm going to warn you, you've had 3 shots at this tonight. I'm not giving you a 4th time on your motion. I'm sorry. And we had a tax increase this year of 8.2% on the average residence. That's what was agreed upon and understood, yes?
Yeah,
Right.
no, yes.
I appreciate the motivation, the passion, and the idealism behind this. But you know, one person's view of this can be different from another. Tell me, do we think it's ethically irresponsible, for instance, to invest in an arms company that's supplying weapons to the dear and good people of the Ukraine to defend against Russian aggression? Would you like to send them pamphlets wishing them well or saying we send you our prayers, but in the meantime, Mr. Putin can destroy your democratic government? That's over the top, I agree. But we heard a little bit of an exchange here between Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Gesselbrock, so let's bring this back to reality. Who knows how many loans are out there by the Royal Bank of Canada? But if you deposit $1, they get to loan that dollar, actually 10 times it, out to whoever they wish within reason. Most of the chartered banks in this country have access to some ethical policies. Most of our money is in term deposits, we've just heard. What are we possibly going to expect the limited staff of the City of Nanaimo do in support of this request for an updated report, which probably won't say anything different than it did before? Fossil fuel is not the only issue in the world. And if we are going to decide which issues we're going to take a position on in terms of our investment policy, maybe for, you know, passionate religious people in town, they don't want to see investments in drug companies that make the pill. That's a strong ethical position for people who are entirely pro-life. Once you start down this path in any significant way and put aside the financial interest of the citizens of Nanaimo, whose duty it is ours to uphold, you're down a pretty long and, I would argue, very problematic path. I'm not aware that we're investing in blood diamonds or anything of an untoward nature. We have money in our banks. We have investments that returned a good return to the citizens of Nanaimo. The tax increase that the citizens had this year would have been higher if we'd done something more, if we'd sunk all of our money into the financial fund through MFA, we'd have less assets today than we did in 2021. I'm sorry, but this is an ideological, feel-good kind of motion, which in my respectful opinion has no place in council. So, having said that, Councillor Hemmens, you've got the last word. Thank you very much. All those in favor of Councillor Gesselbrock's motion, Councillors Eastmere, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Manley, and Brown. And those opposed, Councillors Armstrong, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Perino. Good luck with the report, Ms. Mercer. Question period. Sandra Dale, Navigation Center, which I assume is a reference to the 12A. Sandra Dale, not here. Looks like Derek Siemens. Mr. Siemens, just a little reminder, as we have a number of people on the list, this is question period. So please ask a question.
to us residents that the positioning of a person's Ocean View Departure Bay home got more consultation than this navigation center being built right outside of our front door. Thanks, Paul Manley, for at least chatting with us, but while we were talking, he advised us there will be open drug use tolerated on this site. This is something that hasn't even been discussed because of the ambiguity of BC Housing's proposal. But every single one of you stood in front of us and as a selling point to this proposal said this is people who want to be here. As if that means them wanting to get better. But of course they want to be there. It's a place for them to openly do drugs.
Mr. Siemens,
I want to know, I'll ask a question here. I want to know how the site is not just enabling drug use by allowing them to use it openly, and when it's already a major problem on our street and in our neighborhood.
Mr. Siemens, the law in the province of British Columbia right now is that anyone is entitled to use and possess up to 2.5 grams of illicit substances in the privacy of their home, restricted in certain public places, but that is the law of the province. How this place will be managed, I think it's safe to say that the Canadian Mental Health Association, conscious as it is of the need to try and give people an opportunity to better their lives, is hopefully going to be, I think, and trust they will be, as they have been in other places, sensible with respect to this. We will see.
We will see.
Thank you. The next is, it looks like Kayla Zelke.
Hi there, my name is Kayla Zelke. I'm a 28-year-old homeowner in the area of Old Victoria. Honestly, I showed up today thinking that BC Housing would have a much better plan in place. It's clear that there isn't really an official plan for this. So when can we expect more consultation and answers as to what the center really is? Because so far the amount of consultation has been zero, and it's seeming like we have absolutely no input.
Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Gesselbrock and Councillor Perino. Everybody's jumping on. Councillor Gesselbrock first, sorry. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to say to yourself and to the first gentleman that spoke, and thank you for getting up and speaking on behalf of your neighborhood. I can't think, since I've been here since November 2022, I can't think of another topic that we've spoken about more than this particular issue. Not this particular place, but BC Housing, you know, heart to home. I mean, we have discussed the drug issue, the homelessness issue more than anything else. So today we made a move forward, definitely. But believe me, we have talked about this at absolute nauseam. I don't know if that's an answer for you. And I know you want to know about more consultation. We get it. We get it. And we understand. We get it.
Thank you. The next, it looks like Dave Dean, but I'm not sure.
I have a question. I have a lot of questions. I wish I had time for a delegation, but unfortunately there was no time. It was after the closing period on Friday that I was even able to see it. So I'll stick to one question as per your rules. I'm wondering what kind of compensation is going to be given to the residents of Old Victoria Road who had this thing landing on them with zero consultation, with no input from the community at all, with secret meetings from the province and stuff who aren't even here. I've tried to reach people at Vancouver Island Mental Health, and all we receive is auto replies. We've tried to reach other elected officials outside of the council, and also received a lot of auto replies, thanks to those that did actually reply to us. So yeah, I'll reiterate my question. What kind of compensation are we looking at? Because, I mean, let's just be honest, you know? Let's just be honest, and let's not have rhetoric and like, I get it. People need houses. I understand. I get it. But we've been fighting zoning across the street for us for 8 years, okay? This is where we live for 19 years. And so I'm just wondering, what compensation are we going to get for having this landing on us What are you going to offer to the residents of Old Victoria Road?
We have your question, and BC Housing, Mr. Lindsay, I suspect they've got a communications plan.
So back, and that was back maybe to the earlier question from the delegation. The question was about when. So they've told us later this summer they plan to do further engagement with the community. They do have their website that's set up where people can go and get questions. The question about compensation, certainly the city doesn't compensate adjacent property owners for any land use approvals we give. And obviously I can't answer for BC Housing, but I'm not aware of any location in the province of BC where they've compensated adjacent property owners for such a project.
As I expected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next, it looks like, is it Gord Peter? Something Peter? Last name Peter? All right. The next is Nicholas Reed.
Hello. So, I guess my question is, due to the proximity to the empty lot next door to this proposed facility, because of other facilities have used this kind of land to land further developments and increase the capacity of shelters, I'm wondering if that's on the agenda at the OCP.
I'm not aware of any proposal for expansion of or purchase of lands adjacent. Mr. Lindsay? No?
And I guess the follow-up question I would have would be, I hear you using the term crises for both the homeless problem and the drug epidemic, and I would like to fact check that they are not equivalent in nature, and if you are basing your developments around this, that's going to lead to an unsubstantiated and biased perspective that is not going to address root causes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next is Dawn Marie Menard. I think Ms. Menard has gone home. And the next is Ms. Cardinelli, the NAV Center.
First of all, I'd like to say I behaved myself as much as I possibly could. I really did. And I'm behaving myself now. So my question is, what is the actual statistic on the rehabilitation rate of residents who reside in low barriers facilities in BC and in Nanaimo? Do you know that number? The rehabilitation rate of residents who reside in low barrier facilities.
Councillor Hemmons may be able to assist.
We don't know and we ask.
That is unacceptable. That's unacceptable that you don't know. They need to have those numbers because you can't tell whether a facility is a failure or whether it's working without those numbers. And I suspect that they are quite low.
I think there's a bottleneck.
I think there's a bottleneck too, I agree.
Next phases of housing.
I agree.
People get stuck there, but
I
we've
agree.
been asking for those statistics and they're not available.
I've been asking for those as well, and that is a really disturbing thing to hear you admit. At least we're able to talk about that, and it's leading to questions about the model of housing itself. And if I did get cut off when I was speaking, but I do have ideas about how within the facilities themselves, if there was more diversity.
Ms. Cardinelli, I
Yeah.
appreciate you have ideas and you've shared them with council in the form of a letter, but this is...
You did read my letter. Did everybody read my letter?
Yes, we all read your
Thank
letter.
you.
Indeed, we read other versions of it sent in by other people.
Thank you.
Your next question is about the AAP and Public Works.
Oh, I have a follow-up question
All
to
right,
that one.
please.
What is the average length of time a resident lives in a navigation center facility?
We don't have any stats on NAV centers because they haven't been in BC. We're one of 2 sites that have been chosen. But again, this is not a navigation center by any American definition. This is the Heart and Hearth program, which we do have some information on. But we don't have specific nav center stats.
Why did you choose, like, to put the number of 60 people here in this location? It's the highest number in all of Nanaimo in this location. Why?
So I can share that we have consistently advocated to the province for lower numbers. But as Councillor Manley said, this is what the province has on offer, and to turn it down is to turn down the only public funded housing we have on the docket. So it's not perfect. We don't know the stats. But I'm, for one, not interested in turning it down because we don't have those numbers.
Thank you. The next is Jake Kiernan, and it's 12D, which relates to development permit, variance permit application on Lote Street. I suspect he's not stayed. Yes.
So the Public Works thing, I've been following it, and you have the one and done thing going on, the $90 million and stuff, and that. So my question is, what's to prevent that budget from going over budget without having to consult again and gain a cent again? Because like a lot of projects tend to triple and quadruple, and when you're dealing with a sum like 90 million, is there anything legal that prevents you from just being like, oh, we ran into this problem, we went into this problem, some money in that one in that pocket, some money in that pocket?
We have your point, Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Good question. So that under the legislation, we set aside the maximum that we can borrow. So we basically identify the project, we build in contingencies, staff give their best estimate for cost, and then that's the maximum we borrow. If a project, for example, were to actually go over, there's no mechanism to borrow more long-term money without getting the approval of the electorate. So it's the maximum amount it's in the question for the AP.
So it's capped for sure.
So the
it will not go over 90 million.
The maximum you can borrow, if that ends up being the AP question, whatever the number is, that's the maximum you can go out and do long-term borrowing on.
Okay. And I did have a follow-up question. My follow-up question, I've forgotten, so it's okay.
Thank you. Jeff Annesley, 12A. Mr. Annesley.
Hello, Council. How are you doing tonight? In May 2022, I attended a council meeting where property owners of the corner of Mackey Road and Island Highway were turned down for a third time for a proposal to build a small retail outlet. These owners had modified their plan 3 times, and that land was sold to the city. It is now being built as a wet house. 1030 Old Victoria Road owners also came before City Council several times to develop a large scale storage facility, because it was a small scale storage facility before you guys took it over, and was turned down. Even after commissioning at your request, several reports, including environmental reports, they still were turned down, and that property was sold to the city for social housing, or this navigation center. Can you address this incongruency? I don't want to say this is a pattern, but this is a little concerning that landowners are being jumping through the hoops you're asking them to jump through, and then they're being turned down only to have their land sold to the city.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, can I just first correct some misinformation there? First of all, the city did not buy the property at the corner of Mackey Road. It continues to be owned by that same property owner, and that property owner elected on his own to enter into a lease with BC Housing. The city does not own that property.
But he was turned down in that for a third time for the proposed mall in May 22.
Yeah, there was previous applications, and Council of the Day weights all the applications based on the policies of the day. I don't remember the specifics of that one, but I believe they were proposing a use that Council of the Day felt was inconsistent with the city plan.
And then of course the 1030 issue. You're not refuting that they did want to build a storage facility there, a larger one, and that was turned down several times.
Yeah, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't remember the detailed history of the applicant.
I would suggest, Mr. Annesley, given it's what I will call a fairly technical question, and given the number of applications that council hears and staff do every year, you may wish to put that in writing to council and we'll get you an answer.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. The next is, it looks like Philip and Kim Baker respecting 12D, and I'm going to assume they're probably not here either. And then we have Naomi Woods on 12A.
Great. My name is Naomi Woods. I live on Victoria Road, and I have a question about whether or not council
Can you
has...
lean forward into the mic? You have a very soft voice. Thank you.
In your dealings with BC Housing about any supportive or affordable housing in Nanaimo, is there any consideration of equitable distribution across neighborhoods, or a possibility of putting in equitable distribution of facilities across neighborhoods? Is that a clause that has ever been discussed? There are 11 neighborhoods in Nanaimo that have no supportive or emergency housing, and statistics show that most of the social housing is located in the south part of the city. And I'm wondering if that has ever been discussed with BC Housing, that we really integrate supportive housing in all our neighborhoods, maybe starting with the parcel near your house, but something to that effect that was be more at a policy level, that we get out ahead of it and prepare neighborhoods to be able to take this on and integrate it into their neighborhoods rather than being reactive, which is understandable as we've been through tonight. That's my question.
I think first I'm going to say something, and that is that not all neighborhoods are of equal size, which is obviously consideration, and it has been the policy of the city for, Councillor, I'll let Councillor Armstrong answer.
I was going to say, it's been the policy since around 2011, 2012, but the problem, just as the mayor said, a lot of land doesn't exist in the north end that's suitable or they can afford. It comes down to dollars, right? A lot of times for BC Housing, where's the best bang for the dollars? And they have a tendency to want to also put them where resources are, and there's not a lot of resources in the north end. There is one in the north end on Uplands Drive. There's a low barrier housing on Uplands Drive. And there's a lot of houses that people don't realize that are sober living houses, or people in but they're smaller numbers, extremely successful. Extremely successful. I think what people get caught up in is the large numbers. That's an issue for me, which I've spoken about openly. I think 30 beds, everybody gets treated better, it's easier to manage, whatever, but I do understand the province's position that, you know what, we only have so many dollars, if we can put 50 on, that's what we're gonna do.
Great, thank you.
And in fairness, there are more announcements will come in due course.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
great.
existing sites at Labio as well is an example of social housing. And as much as people like to pretend it's the center or south, it's really more in the north end of the community.
I can share a map so you'll see it visually if you'd like. It's a lot of big gaps. And I'm totally supportive of supportive housing. It's a great mechanism that we have to address a complicated issue, for sure. But by concentrating it in one part of the city, intentionally or not, cost related or not, it further stigmatizes the issue and further compounds the problems that those neighborhoods are already tackling. As you know, there's been a lot about the people who will be served as residents, but it's also about the communities that will be hosting them and integrating them into their community. So it would be nice if it could be a little bit more of a policy consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Alan Ma, 12D. I assume Mr. Ma is not here. It looks like Chauvin Johnson, Navigation Center.
Hi, Council. I'm going to try to not go into labor during this one. I'm curious and hopeful that we can keep the name of the Navigation Center out of what this site is. I guess my first question is all council members aware of the original proposed Navigation Center, how that funding was supposed to be held, and how that would significantly play a role and an impact within our community? So then my follow-up question would be, why are we allowing this to be called a navigation center when it is not that at all? You guys know that I'm a very strong advocate as it goes for those who are unhoused and substance use affected. And Ben, you used a word that really hit for me about a half an hour ago. You said willful ignorance. And I think everybody in this room has intelligence and compassion and care. And it's very clear that there's so much dialogue that is being put out there that is actually not accurate to what is happening in community. We're all in a very uncomfortable position, regardless of what side of the fence we are in this conversation, in this debate, or where we live, or what we're operating. But what I think we're all continuing to fail and coming to the table with is just the reality and the tangibility around actually making an impact to where we are currently at. I know
there is a question in here.
Yep, the question's coming, the last question anyways. I won't have a chance to probably delegate again before I go into maternity leave, and this is work that I've been working with for over the last 12 years, and it will continue to make significant impact. The last question is, in knowing that what's about to be announced, and where funding is going towards the CAB and the 24-hour center and the navigation center, and hopefully something that will be a warming center and a cooling center, what's the plan for the next 6 months? And is there one? And at least going into this winter, when we all know that we've been to this place for the last 6 years, is there going to be proactive conversations and community consultations with people at the table to discuss even the plan for this winter as it goes for shelter? Because we clearly won't even have these sites up yet.
In a general way, I'm going to respond and say, as you know, we are parties to a memorandum of understanding with BC Housing, Island Health, the province, various senior government agencies deliver all kinds of services. We don't necessarily control, and obviously in most cases do not control. We have input, and what exactly they decide to do or not do is beyond our control. I see Mr. Lindsay nodding, and I'm sure he wants to say something.
Just, Your Worship, just certainly echo the urgency and making sure we get as much housing, and Council's been advocating for more winter shelters and shelter spaces generally. The commitment from BC Housing is to get some of these hearth sites up and running this fall before the cold weather. But in addition to that commitment, Council's also again this year set aside money in your budget to support winter warming spaces. And I believe also, although I should be careful not to speak for them, but I understand that the Reaching Home funds also have allocated additional resources for that. So there's definitely work in the community. Recognize there's more work that needs to be done, but certainly it's on our radar as a priority.
Can I ask if that funding you're speaking of is the $400,000 that was approved to match Reaching Homes and go to the CAB?
The money I'm referring to, Your Worship, is the money that Council set aside, and I'm sorry I don't.
So is there additional money
I think it was.
outside the
I think it was
400,000?
500,000, but I will have to follow up.
It's 400,000, right? That was currently approved to match Reaching Homes with the CAB. And there's a plan to have that in place for this winter. What about for this summer? We broke a record today. Where's our cooling center?
Sorry, how is this connected?
Sorry, Your Worship, I missed the second part of the question. I was listening.
It's very hard to hear anyone talk when we're all talking at once. So, Mr. Perhaps you could ask your last question, please, again, so Mr. Lindsay can hear it.
Is there additional funding available for warming center or cooling center provisions for this year outside the $400,000 that has been appointed to the CAB from Reaching Homes for service provision in our community?
So there's there's the money from the Reaching Homes that was set aside, but there's also City Council has set aside money in their own budget for specifically warming spaces in the winter. Is there additional monies being set aside for a cooling center? No.
And for a warming center outside of the $400,000 that's now been delegated from council? No.
With respect, I mean, we've asked a lot about the navigation center, and I've let you drift past into the warming centers, but
it's because they're correlated.
Question period is for questions related to council agenda items, so.
And we're happy to follow up tomorrow, Your Worship.
Exactly.
I can
If you've
confirm.
got further questions, email them in, Mr. Lindsay, someone will answer them. Okay, thank you. Next, it's Natalie Kakian, Caitlin. I can't make it out. Sorry? I'll indulge you. I assume she was here waiting with you.
She was, yeah. So my question is obviously regarding the proposed navigation center, and mainly around the lack of surrounding infrastructure. Old Victoria Road is not a pedestrian-friendly area. It is a busy through road with heavy commuter and industrial truck traffic. There's sharp turns, concrete barriers, no shoulders, no crosswalks, and most obviously no sidewalks along the entire stretch of road. Literally 20 meters north of this proposed site is an uphill sharp winding turn with a blind corner and concrete barriers tight to the vehicle lane. And then head in the other direction south, and there are no sidewalks, and the closest lane of traffic having no shoulder, which falls directly into the ditch. There is not an area to walk in either direction that's pedestrian friendly. I don't see how a 60-unit complex consisting entirely of pedestrians can be considered for this area without a serious concern for safety and lack of infrastructure. Like if we put it this way, if there was a proposed 60-unit condo developer who wanted to build on this lot, there would be serious holdup and discussion about the obvious issues with lack of sidewalks, dangerous roadways, and lack of anything resembling walkability in the neighborhood. So I would like to know how you guys have planned to address this issue, and frankly, if pedestrian safety was even a concern for you guys with this site.
It's a very good question. If there were private development and condo units or apartment units going up, there'd be a sidewalk right in front of it, which is how we're filling in all the gaps in our sidewalk infrastructure through the city, because we're a city of 91.3 square kilometers, spread out over 21.2 kilometers end to end, and there's no way at Mr. Sims, what are we running now for a meter of sidewalk? 2,000 to 3,000? There's no perfect places, and I appreciate the concerns about the safety of the individuals who may get to live in this facility, and your point is taken. Ms. Robertson, Sydney Robertson, Navigation Center.
Good evening. My name is Sydney Robertson. I'm the chair of the South End Community Association. Very briefly, before I get to my question, I just want to thank all of you and city staff for all the obvious time and work and thought that you put into this. I know that this is hard stuff, so I appreciate that. My question is, I have so many questions, but the one I picked for tonight is in some ways through you to BC Housing, because we have a problem reaching BC Housing. They are not engaging with us. When a process like this goes through, you know, we know that there are lots of meetings and negotiations and discussions that happen behind the scenes, and I understand why those have to happen behind the scenes. At any point in that process, is there an analysis of the neighborhood context? Like, I'm certain from previous discussions with BC Housing and Island Health and that there's discussion about whether a site is appropriate for the residents and the programming. And, you know, there's quite a bit of detail that goes into looking at whether the site works on that angle. And I'm just wondering, is there any kind of actual analysis of the neighborhood context? I'm going to throw in here that this question comes from multiple discussions with BC Housing during the previous rounds of supportive housing announcements, where they kept talking about their building in Parksville. And we kept saying, this ain't Parksville, right? So, yeah, so my question is there any kind of community analysis?
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. It said I was number 3, though, so I don't know if someone was before me. On the BC Housing end, I have no idea. But I know that our staff extensively, before it even ever gets to council, and these items do get to council multiple times for discussions, but staff extensively discuss community priorities, sort of the long-standing goals of distribution across the city, all sorts of those things to try to influence how BC Housing is looking at the city and looking at, you know, their work programs and their capital programs and the political pressures they're receiving from their government, and trying to see, you know, ultimately how that's realized out on the landscape and in the neighborhoods. I would also say this, is that the only time these discussions ever happen is when something finally gets agreed to. It's not all the properties or the considerations that, you know, through council or through staff or through other mechanisms, there's strong pushback against for, I think, a whole lot of reasons that people raised tonight and those considerations. And so I say this not as an excuse, but I think often it can feel like those community considerations are unheard, right? And whether they're coming from neighborhoods or whether they're coming from service providers, because the process and the forum of trying to deal with a centralized agency and local communities with even more local neighborhoods and having that conversation is not set up, I think, for success, whatever success looks like. It's not set up for that. So imperfect as this, any one given item might be when it's presented like this publicly, unfortunately all the times and the pushback and the no's and the community considerations that are relayed aren't really ever seen. It's unfortunate, because I think what it does is erodes that trust of community conversation. And I think I think that's a really fair criticism, and one that is probably shared by everybody sitting at this table, every single one of the staff members, of we would love to see a better process. And at the end of the day, you know, we just continue to try to relay that message respectfully and firmly, knowing that a provincial agency with a whole bunch of different provincial goals and political goals is putting a lot of pressure on those folks as well. And the system just doesn't work that well.
I'm hesitant to ask if there's anyone else who wishes to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a related follow-up? I appreciate your answer. Thank you. And I know that we've talked before about kind of proactive strategies to try to get out ahead of the process. Where are we at with that? Are we making any progress? I understand it's complicated. I understand it's hard. I got to tell you, I'm starting to get a sense of deja vu that I come back to council with this same conversation. So I would love to not have this conversation again in 5 years. Are we getting anywhere about moving ahead of the process?
I could only answer honestly. Some days I feel like the answer is yes. Other days I feel like the answer is no.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty. Yeah.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
No, I appreciate the question, and I think that even now we're on the back foot, just sort of everybody's trying to find solutions, and we do need to get to that proactive place. And I think we have been putting the things in place to work on that, and I do have quite a lot of hope with the work that's being done at the Systems Planning Organization. And I think one major step is just understanding kind of like what we're dealing with, and that's like having proper data in terms of like how many people, what are the different demographics of people, what locations are people coming from, what are they utilizing, and we actually don't really have great data on that. And so like one thing is just this organization, which is working with all the different agencies and closely with the city, is to put in place a mechanism of coordinated access where whenever an individual has contact with an outreach worker, a shelter, supportive housing, their name and their information is added into a shared database that all these service providers can access when they enter this person and figure out where's the best place for them to go, but also is that we have just an understanding of what we're dealing with. And at the same time, the Systems Planning Organization is building a map of what we actually have, a centralized location of like how many supportive housing units, how many shelters we have, how many detox facilities, how many second stage housing, everything, how many outreach workers. And then from that, build a model of like, what do we need in terms of, you know, first contact with a person is with the outreach worker or a shelter, and then their information gets entered, and then there's people that can look at the information and then move them to, say, the navigation center or supportive housing. Maybe it needs to go to the detox facility, maybe, you know, depending on what facilities we have. But as we build out the map of what we need, we're gonna know the locations and what stage of that pipeline or of that system of care and housing we need to build out more so that our community can come prepared to the table with BC Housing, because there's two types of communities out there. There's one that aren't organized, and basically BC Housing loves working with that because they can just say, this needs to go here. And then there's on the other end of the spectrum, they're super organized that know exactly what they need, and they can advocate and get that from BC Housing. And we're somewhere in the middle where it's sort of like this messy reorganization, and we need to get to that community that knows what it needs, where it needs to go, and how to build it out, so that we've got a menu that we're asking BC Housing, so that'd be very proactive. And I think that is what we're working towards building, and it's gonna take some time to get there, but I do think the right pieces are in place to do that, so that we will have that. And yeah, that's, you know, what we're working on. That's something that I'm putting a lot of energy in, and I think that it's gonna help us get off the back foot and onto our front foot so that we can address this, yeah, large issue that's really bringing our community down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last is Kaylin May Tobin. Mr. Tobin.
Hi all, thank you, and I will try and be brief. I guess, so I'm a resident of Victoria Road, and just for transparency, my question is, when was the parcel purchased by the city, and was it purchased for this specific purpose? And then in the diagram shown, the center is using about half of the parcel, so are there plans for the other half of the parcel?
Mr. Lindsay?
The parcel was purchased earlier this year, partly exactly for this purpose. The balance of the property, it's still owned by the city, but ongoing discussions with BC Housing. Again, this is temporary housing we're talking about with Navigation Center, but ongoing hopes of a more permanent housing on the balance of the property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Moved, Councilor Prino, seconded Councilor Thorpe. All those in favor, any